public meeting. The purpose of the executive session is to discuss real estate, title consideration, sale, and purchase.
Turn that on maybe. Pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101C. No action was taken by the commission in executive session. Oh, get all my paperwork straight here. Things took a little longer. I apologize for the meeting not starting right on time here. I'm going to read the advisory meeting schedules. Well, I guess first we should take a roll call. How about that? Commissioner Shepard.
I am present.
Commissioner Bell.
Here.
Commissioner Briscoe is present. So all three commissioners are present. The Marine Advisory Committee will meet Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Commission chambers here. 1801 Roder Avenue, Bellingham. A Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, will meet Thursday, May 9th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. in the ARF Conference Room at 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. And the BIAC, the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, will meet Thursday, May 9th, 2019 at 5 p.m. at the ARF Conference Room, 2005 West Bakerview Road, Bellingham International Airport. And I believe with that, we'll go to public comment. And we have a few people signed up. So, Mark Bash, is it Basher?
Buer, I think.
Was it?
Buer.
Buer, I'm sorry.
My spelling must be handwriting.
I apologize.
Like over here.
Either place is fine. Just please state your name and your address.
Sure. Mark Buer, 2020 Engineering, and my address is, home address is 3214 Locust Avenue. And I wanted to say that I'm here mostly to listen to Maury Ingram speak about the Lingnan Building site. And I don't know all the details of their plans, but I've heard of it being some kind of food campus, which I totally support that idea. And I think the site itself is unique, set back kind of in the spot it is between the existing railroad track and the old railroad track area. So it's a little challenging there, but I think that plus affordable housing, which I like to refer to now as workforce housing. We've been involved with a number of those kind of projects from Friday Harbor, Port Townsend, and other places. I just got back from Seattle. Affordable housing is a big issue. We can't find places for people who are working in the neighborhoods to even live and get to work. A lot of the people I met today are commuting over an hour just to get to their workplaces in Seattle. So I'm supportive of that piece of what I think I'm going to hear tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. John Brown?
My name is John Brown. I live at 233 Terrace Place over above the Marine Park in Fairhaven. I see on the presentation part of the agenda that there will be an update on the quiet zones, the railroad improvements. I'm only going to speak for about 10 seconds, I hope. I live right near the Harris and the boat launch crossings there, and we get 8 to 10 whistles a night. I realize that this is an issue you're very familiar with. Other places in town other than us have this kind of problem. I have spoken with a port official who has told me that there is grant money that has been allocated for the upgrade of these crossings, and that work is going ahead. Upgrades are going ahead to make them into quiet zones, which in time will alleviate the problem. And that this work, I don't know where it is going on what quiet zones. Of course, everyone wants to get to the front of the line and have it done in their own neighborhood, I'm sure. My question to you is what, regarding the Harris Avenue and Fairhaven boat launch areas, what is the status of the work so far? What percentage of the work is done? That's one question. When will it be done? That's the second. I gather that after the work is done, Burlington Northern will be approached to cooperate with the work, that there will be some sort of process here, they will be involved. And I am wondering whether you anticipate any problems in dealing with Burlington Northern once the upgrades are taken care of. Finally, how long will it be before the whistles stop? I gather that all of this is going to be taken up in the. I just wanted to bring these concerns forward. Thank you.
I think Executive Fix may answer a couple.
Yes, sir. I believe all those questions will be answered during the presentation, and if they're not, then please feel free to contact us. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. April Parker. Oh, I didn't see you in the back, April.
Hi, thank you for having me and thank you for your service. I'm April Barker, a Bellingham City Council member. My address is 3127 Birchwood Avenue in Bellingham, Washington, and I'm just here to support the great work that the port's doing in really taking seriously affordable housing and permanently affordable housing, as well as food and food access. So I'm definitely here to support a project at the Lignit Building. Would ask you to recognize that we've done a lot of planning in the city of Bellingham. We have a lot of different documents that you can go back to and know that our community supports permanently affordable housing. They support supporting our nonprofits, and they support safe and healthy, accessible food. So I don't know how much bigger of a process you need to go through, but I would just strongly urge you to really rely upon those as we're in a housing crisis and start to move the process further forward. And I'll be here to support you in any way I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Now, I may mispronounce this. Michael Civeria?
Yep, Michael Chiverio,
Okay, I was close.
pretty good. 2221 South Avenue, Bellingham. I know what you guys consider a big part of your job is to create jobs and to facilitate jobs in Whatcom County. And other folks have commented on the fact that because it's so expensive to live here and wages are low, that we have a real need to make housing more affordable for average working people. And in fact, studies have shown that about 50% of the people in Bellingham cannot afford to pay rents or mortgages at the market rates in town, affordability being defined as 30% of your household income. We just don't have enough of that kind of housing. It seems clear that there is an opportunity to provide a little more, probably a lot sooner than the Harcourt folks will ever get to it on the Lignin site and the port with this proposal that we're going to hear about from Maury today. And I would strongly encourage you to recognize and work with this proposal because the housing issue is urgent now. It's not something that we need to have done 20 years down the road. We need it right now, and as much as you all can help, I really appreciate your openness and cooperation with the proposal coming forward for the Lignin site. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Schisler?
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I've lived and owned a small consulting company here in Bellingham for 25 years, focusing on community development, economic development, and housing affordability is a big part of that
Could you
work.
please state your
now.
name for the record,
Sorry,
please?
Paul Schisler. Yes,
you.
working address 1010 C Street.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm here too to hear more about the Lignin parcel potential redevelopment. What I've heard so far is pretty exciting. I think we have a chance to work together to create a real showcase project that includes housing, maybe with a range of affordability, maybe the widest possible range of affordability for people who work nearby. It would be nice if people had the choice of living in an affordable home near where they work. And along with a range of housing affordability, the site can accommodate the local food campus that many people are enthused about and other non-residential uses as well. So I'm here to learn more and eager to see the project move forward with your support.
Thank you, Paul. So that is everyone that has signed up. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this time that has not signed up? If you would like to speak, feel free to step forward. Okay. So I guess we'll move on to our consent agenda.
Commissioners, suggest a couple changes here to the consent agenda. The first being that item number E is removed It is the agreement between the parties in that, not the port, but the other parties didn't come to an agreement, and so they've canceled the sale of the company, and therefore they no longer need your approval of a lease modification. Just take it off completely.
Take E off of there?
Correct. Okay. And then also, I'm going to suggest that we move C to be action item number 4. It ties very closely with action item number 3. And I believe there's some discussion wanted on 3, so we might as well move consent item C to coincide with action item 3. Does that make sense? So we have eliminated E, and we have moved C to an action item. So you'll be voting on
It's going to be an action item.
Correct. You'll be voting on A, B, D, and F.
It's a new alphabet. Okay, so we're moving removing C from consent agenda to making it an action item number 4.
Correct?
And we are removing E from the consent agenda altogether. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
That said, it's a motion to approve consent agenda items A through F with the removal of items C and E from the consent agenda.
Gentlemen, any questions? Commissioner Bell?
This is just for the removal, correct?
This is to approve the consent.
This is to
Shall I read again?
remaining items.
Yeah, I clarified some things with Brian earlier on B, that I just kind of wanted
I have
to-
some questions on B as well, so maybe I need the clarification that you needed.
We're not quite ready for the vote yet, then.
Yeah.
No.
Fair enough.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, so for the site, it says it's a 13.3 acre site and that we no longer need the additional mitigation because our airport expansion is not expected to take place in the timeframe we initially thought. So do we own the additional land already for phase 2 of the mitigation, or is that something we would yet to be purchased?
Yeah, that actually, all of that land, we don't own any of it, actually. We lease it from WDFW, Fish and Wildlife. So actually, that property will be available for other mitigation projects in the future, pending an agreement with WDFW. So we just have buttoned this up to wrap up this phase of work and are not currently pursuing this second mitigation project, but that property is something that would be available.
Okay, so WDFW is going to continue to hold it. We never purchased it.
That's right.
It's something that we would have entertained a lease with them if we actually needed it.
That's right. Yeah, it's a conservation area that WDFW will continue to retain that way, and it could be a future mitigation project for us or somebody else.
Okay. All right, and there's no sense in doing the extra work now to mitigate and bank this for future? Is there a banking program that exists in that way that we're able to leverage our current capacity and move forward?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. This was tied to very specific projects that were developed in the airport area. An actual wetland bank or a habitat bank is very extensive and hard to permit, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. This wouldn't be available in that capacity. We did talk to the Army Corps of Engineers about that potentially, and it didn't have, it wasn't going to work that way. So because we didn't need it at our project areas up by the airport, the expansion of the phase 2 was no longer needed. And it's a fairly expensive project. I think it's over $1 million worth of work just to do this habitat project, the second phase.
Okay. And just so everyone knows, tell us about the good work we did on those 13.3 acres.
It's a very successful habitat project for waterfowl, wetland mitigation, created new wetland acreage as well as buffer areas. It's off of Slater Road along the trail that goes along up to Ferndale. We've done monitoring of that. It's been really successful. We've actually found evidence of wood ducks in the boxes that we've built, and yeah, it's all the resource agencies are really happy with it and have signed off on it as a successful mitigation project.
Great. And it's been the subject of port employee planting projects, and it's been a collaborative effort to get it there, so
Yep.
glad to hear. All right, that's all my questions on that one.
Mr. Bell?
And mine was more of a clarification to when this ends, because
Yeah.
we're on amendment number 11.
Yeah.
On this one. And as you walked me through that, I just kind of wanted you to tell everybody else what you told me, and that is that we're nearing the end.
Yes, this project is wrapping up. You know, this is the final phase of work, really, to get the agency approvals to close this project out. We've done a lot of work to get here, as you noted, and as we just discussed. But there's a few kind of minor things like updated maps, the things that the Army Corps of Engineers need to button this project up. And this should be the final amendment to this contract with our consultant team, and that this project we can move on from. Yeah.
From your lips to God's ears, right? That's all I got.
That's it. Mr. Shepherd?
I've got a question on D as well, but that's all I have for B.
Thank you, Brian.
Hi, Commissioners. Pam Taft, Special Projects in the Marinas.
Pam. So tell me, it looks like we're taking this out of RCO use. What use is it going to be put into?
It will be remaining a day dock, visitor moorage, but the Bellingham Sailing Club is going to be continuing the lease there, so for their sailing program.
Okay. So we're able to keep it in use for the sailing program
Yes.
with removing this RCO designation?
Correct.
Okay. And it will still be available for visitor use if needed?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. For the day, it's just temporary use, yeah.
Okay, so it seems like it's mostly an administrative change here. It doesn't really impact the public's use of that facility largely.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions, Commissioner Shepherd? Commissioner Bell? None. I have none. If you would, Diane?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and F.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shepherd?
Aye.
I'm aye as well. Passes 3-0.
Thank you.
That brings us to our first presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Lisa Citron, with Project Manager with A Child's Point of View. Lisa reached out to Port staff a few months ago about an art exhibit. She was wondering if there was any waterfront property the Port had that could potentially house a art exhibit. And I went and looked at it with her and mentioned the ASB Trail as a potential location, and so she's familiar with that location. Thought it could be a good fit. I said there was, two things that she would need to do. One is come and show you and tell you about what she was thinking, and you'd be the decision makers. And then the second was that we have a hold harmless agreement if she'd need to install the art at her expense, and then if it needed to be removed, we'd make an effort to reach out, but if we couldn't, the site's cited for future cleanup and redevelopment, that we could remove the art at any time for any reason. So at any rate, I'm pleased to welcome Lisa to tell you a little bit more about the art project.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to meet you. Let me give you some context to this. It's not just an art project. This is a project through the means of these drawings that were enlarged and made into metal, traced, made into metal, 19 images. And the drawings are the result of 19 intrepid fourth graders following their investigation of habitat loss, of plastics in the ocean. And their intellectual, pragmatic, and emotional and heartfelt response to watching their future disappear. It is said that there are only two games in the world. One is, you're wrong, I'm right. And the other game is, let's make life more wonderful. And the process of investigating habitat loss was structured in such a way is that the children could step into the roles of the other and see what the other points of view were. For example, hungry coyote can't find food, comes down into the city, finds Cat's bowl full of food. What do Cat and Coyote have to say to one another? And they would dramatize this and in the classroom about what that conversation would look like. So I'm here today to ask for your approval to move this, in my estimation, not so humble, this glorious piece of work, this urgent voice, from a place in Maritime Heritage Park, which is opposite Whatcom Falls and gets very little traffic, to a place where we expect to have wonderful visibility in the new parks and the trails here at the waterfront. When the fourth graders were asked, how do we protect our planet? They, as I said, they had useful, pragmatic ideas. They also said they feel outnumbered. 2 boys refused to participate in a drama kind of investigation that I described earlier with Coyote meeting Cat. And the kids said they were worried, and I said, show us. So they made a pretend house, and they pulled up 2 chairs, they made their beds, they lay down on the beds, and they shivered. They were worried. They said they couldn't sleep. So, going to the next image, I'm going to quote the kids' description of their work, humans trashing the earth. One boy used a word that is seldom if ever used in adult dialogue about climate change, and that word is kind. At the installation, I asked Franio, tell me about this. He said it's an eel dying from eating food on the ocean floor. All the drawings expressed a children's thinking. None of the drawings were directed by their teacher or any other adult. They were the result of what they had investigated for several months. But at first, the kids were flummoxed. Why do we cut down trees? And etched into that drawing is the word flummoxed and that question. Seals swimming in a sea of plastic. Plastic bags trapping small fish. This is before all of us knew that we have this wonderful new compostable now, where a lot of plastic six-pack is being replaced by compostable material made from seaweed that can be eaten and dissolve. So following the investigation and following the flummoxed state of mind and the frozen, oh my God, what are we going to do? Resilience kicked in. The children quickly got the idea that they could make the impossible possible. I was blown away by a 10-year-old synthesizing 6 months' work in this image. Whoops, what happened to it? Help me, Mike. Thank you. One girl drew this image. It says, flummoxed, confused, stuck. Let's make change. Oops, how am I doing? I'm probably pressing on the keyboard. Okay. One boy made, they explored being inventors. Okay, what are we going to do about this problem? So he made TrashBot. Okay, I really don't know why I'm doing this. I'm wasting your precious time with RAM Construction volunteered to install this, and the guys, the crew who put this up, they were great, and the TrashBot was her favorite. He was also the favorite at Mount Baker Powder Coating that donated the powder coating to this. And this very modern drawing, if you think about, okay, Stand By Me, please. It's my favorite song, Stand By Me. Benny King, Stand By Me. Okay. One student was relieved that compostables have been invented. And clearly, children are thinking and worrying about animals made homeless and ocean creatures dying from plastics. They say, it's time to make life more wonderful for everyone, humans too. So we're requesting your approval to move this never-been-done-before mural to a new waterfront park or trail. And will you help by paying attention to what our children are saying and what's keeping them awake at night? Will you let them know not only what the threats are, but that we're all in this together and can do something about it by making their work visible? For after all, this is change for the common good on common ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? I forgot to ask. Do you have any?
Mr. Shepherd.
Yeah, Mike, I have a question for you, but Lisa, thank you very much for your work. Really
welcome.
exciting to see. I love seeing all the student work, and I can tell how much they got out of this project. So thank you for your work with those students and really bringing some of their passion and excitement to us. Mike, for the current installation that we have at the ASB Trail, we have some artwork by Western Washington University art class. Have we had any problems with vandalism or damage to that? It's something that when I'm walking around, I see it, it's nice and bright and it's eye-catching. Have we had any real issues?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. I don't think we have.
Yeah, great.
And I can add that since September, there has been no graffiti on the work itself in the park.
Okay, so this has been in Maritime Heritage since September of
Yes.
this year? Okay, great.
Commissioner Bell?
You hearkened me back to my fourth grade. They were building a new elementary school in my fourth grade, and they asked us students to draw something to be put in a mural above the school. And as a fourth grader, because the school, we were going to be the first sixth grade graduating class to be put there, and they actually put our murals up above that. And I can remember as a kid having the honor I felt of having that put memorialized in that way.
Right.
And to this day, I drive my kids by it. They curse me for it. But I was pretty proud. I have no idea what my figure was saying at the time. Nothing nearly this profound. But it was meaningful as a kid to be recognized in that way. So I just thank you for your efforts.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your efforts. We appreciate that. Mike, I have a question. We're talking about putting this on the ASB Trail, I presume. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, yep.
And east side, west side?
Undetermined, but I was thinking just past where the Western art exhibit currently is, so as you continue down the trail, it'd be kind of the natural progression.
Better visibility on that side?
Yeah, you can't go all the way around the trail yet. We haven't resolved our issue with DNR and their corner ownership there, that they won't allow trail recreational access across. So I think you have to put it on the kind of northeast side where the public can currently access.
So that'd be north of the art that's there now or south of it?
To be determined. I'd go out with Lisa and figure out, where the preferred location was, but somewhere right in that area.
And who are we thinking might move this stuff?
So it would be, they would move it and install it. So, yeah, so
I
part of
think
the
she said
agreement.
RAM would do that work, or did RAM do the previous work?
Yes, RAM volunteered to install it, and I'm prepared to ask them to volunteer again.
Okay, so that's to be determined. Yeah. They're on the spot, Ram. They're on TV. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions anybody have? Thank you. So we'll move on to our second presentation.
Are we looking for approval on this, Mike, or?
Yeah, I think if we get a head nod from the commission that that's an appropriate use, then I would work with Lisa to sign the site use and access agreement and that would authorize that to be located on port property.
Do you need a motion, or is this just?
Why don't we do a quick motion? A motion to approve the artwork as presented here for the SB Trail.
Okay, we have a motion, we'd like to approve what he said. Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
Commissioner Shepherd.
I as well.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye as well, 3-0. Yeah. We have an update for the Fairhaven Quiet Zone Railroad improvements.
Good afternoon, commissioners and public. I realize there's a lot of interest in what we're doing at the Quiet Zone crossings.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see, so this presentation covers the Fairhaven Quiet Zone only. I'll touch briefly on the waterfront quiet zone as well. But as I get into it, I hope to answer your questions posed earlier, but if I have not, please feel free to raise those questions again.
Can I get you to introduce yourself, too, Brian? Thanks.
Excuse me, yes, Brian Keenan, project engineer with the Port of Bellingham. So starting off, the port has three railroad crossings that are part of the Fairhaven Quiet Zone. Two of those crossings are included in the 2019 strategic budget that's been approved. And those are the budget line items as well as the CIP numbers. So as I mentioned, there are two quiet zone crossings. One is the Fairhaven Quiet Zone. It includes 5 crossings. We have Harris Avenue, what's termed the Alaska Ferry Railroad Crossing, FMIP, that's the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park, Building 5, that's a private crossing. There's also 2 crossings at the Boulevard Park, and those two crossings are being improved by the city of Bellingham. The one in the middle, down at Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park, that private crossing, that's an agreement between the port and the city to do some simple sign improvements for that private crossing. The waterfront quiet zone has 6 crossings, and that's shown in the middle to right portion in kind of a magenta color. And the port doesn't have any crossings in that quiet zone, and those are being implemented by the city. So questions about anticipated construction, status, that type of thing. If you look at the figure here, it zooms in on the Fairhaven Quiet Zone. Currently, Harris Ave, we're looking at implementation probably late 2019. The Alaska Ferry crossing next year. The FMIP 5 building the private crossing 2019 that would be implemented as part of the city's Bayview Drive crossing improvements. And the Boulevard Park pedestrian trail crossing is complete. I don't know if there are any questions on the 5 crossings here before I move forward.
We got some grant funds for the Harris Avenue, is that correct?
Correct, and I'll go into that next.
So
but just if there are any questions about the 5 crossings here, move on.
Well, the 2020, I thought we were 2019 and all. Why are we on a 2020 on the ferry crossing?
I think we're going to get into that a little bit later too, but we're running into some issues with that. The costs have gone up quite a bit. The railroad, we're working with them on what it looks like. You're going to see more details that originally we thought we could do a non-mountable median like we are with Harris Avenue, and that's looking less and less likely without major effects on tenants in the area, which means you go to a 4-gated crossing, which gets quite a bit more expensive. So we're going to get into that more though. You'll get those questions answered.
Correct, thanks, Rob.
And is the 2019 Bayview one, that's budgeted by the city already? That's in their current budget and plan the scope of work for this year?
That's my understanding, yes. Yep. Okay, so specifically the Harris Ave Railroad crossing, that is grant funded. That was one of the questions earlier. The budget for that is $350,000. There's a 10% match by the port for that grant. The grant covers design and construction. The status on that project, the design's underway, coordinating with the various agencies on this project. And they are passive improvements. So we're not talking about adding additional railroad gates here. It's a non-mountable median and additional signage and kind of expanding the driveways to our facilities there to accommodate that non-mountable median. And the grant monies are part of enhancing safety at these intersections and crossings. So that is the goal of the project, although we're working with our consultants to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's quiet zone compliant. But the focus of the grants is safety, not necessarily the quiet zone compliance. It's just a important nuance there.
But we wouldn't spend all the time and effort to do something that wasn't going to meet the needs of the quiet zones.
Correct.
So even though the grants are primarily safety
That's
related. And in my opinion, all the quiet zone improvements are not just about noise, they're also about safety.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Brian, where did the grants come from?
This one is Federal Highways Administration.
So they're federal funds?
Yeah, administered through WashDOT. It's apparently a program that they had started years ago and hadn't had these grant monies available lately, but they had some additional grant monies available, so they restarted that program. Okay, so the current design is, and I realize it's a little difficult. I apologize for the figure here on the left. I don't intend for you to be able to read the different notes, but the gist of it is the red areas are to widen the openings to both the Marine Park entrance and the main road to the cruise terminal. The green lines along Harris Avenue are these non-mountable median installations, and then the green hatched areas are modifications to parking and pedestrian crossings to improve pedestrian safety moving across that complicated intersection there. And then on the right-hand side, that photo is of a non-mountable median for folks that aren't familiar with what that would look like. Another example down at the new Laurel Street railroad crossing that will open here in the next 6 weeks or so.
How high is a non-mountable?
Oh, it's
If I have a truck.
6
And
inches,
you
8
can
inches.
get your Raptor over it.
That doesn't look non-mountable.
Yeah, so I think the point is the shape of it. So it's not rolled, right? So it's vertical wall, flat top.
But that'll stop me.
Yeah, right.
Hey, you're not helping, okay? Come on.
But there you go. There you go. But yeah, if you want to get a closer look at what these look like.
So this is what you're talking about putting in on the two green stripes on the left side there is where they would go?
There's actually three because
Correct.
there's one going into the cruise terminal as
correct.
well.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, the concept here, if it's not self-explanatory, is the cars pull up to queue up and they can't go around the gate.
Right.
Right, so you run this non-mountable median some distance away from the tracks, and that is just yet another obstacle to try to keep people behind the gates. Okay. The Alaska Ferry Railway crossing, that is fully funded by the port at this time. We've budgeted a little over $500,000 on that. The status is we're evaluating a few different alternatives, as Rob mentioned earlier, and we are coordinating with the agencies and our consultant on that. The quad gate, adding 2 additional gates to that crossing the cost range is varied. So what I've included here are what I've heard from recent installations. So doing a quad gate can be between $600,000 and $1.2 million. And involves running additional conduits, tying that back to the railroad equipment, their little shed there, all the signaling equipment. That's one of the reasons for that wide spread in cost. Additionally, with the quad gates, there are annual maintenance fees to BNSF, and those are to cover the maintenance of the additional equipment. In the case of a quad gate, all or most of the work would be done by BNSF. It wouldn't be done by the port unless there are other modifications to that crossing improvement to accommodate the 4 gates. And in this case, there wouldn't be any impact to the activities or lease areas down there. We also looked at passive improvements like we had talked about, similar to Harris Ave. But it's as we dug into that one, it would involve a really major shift of what that intersection looks like, and would impact the leaseholds and the public's use of the boat launch and whatnot. The trade-off on the passive improvements is that all the work would be done by the port and not subject to BNSF, and there's pros and cons to both. But that interruption of this intersection down there would be pretty dramatic. So for those reasons, we're hoping to move forward with a passive improvement. We're not finding a really good cost-effective solution there, and that's part of the reason why this one's taking a little bit longer than the Harris Ave crossing. I'm just looking to try to get this right. So.
Is there any expectation that we can obtain grant funding like we did for Harris Ave for this?
This one, let's see. So there was an earlier grant. Let's see, January, February timeframe, and it wasn't. It was. I think we learned about it pretty late, and threw that in there. It's not clear whether the railroad crossings would even be covered by that type of grant money. But at this point, I'm not aware of any other grant opportunities.
So is this projected by the railroad, or is that something we came with?
Now, the quad gates, to answer your question, it's both. BNSF expressed the cost could be upwards of the 1.2 million, and then talking with the city and other agencies and through our consultant, understand that cost can be half that. It really depends on what is needed.
Well, it seems kind of high when you've got a gate already dropping on both sides of the railroad, and you're simply, I don't know why they have to go to the building. You can just hook the two together.
Honestly, I was exactly where you're at until talking it through with BNSF. It's not as simple as adding the 2 additional gates, the additional equipment. They're boring underneath the railroad.
Well, and there's a whole, just to put it in summary, there's a whole sensor system on the quad
Right.
gate has to be built in. So if a car does get stuck in there, the sensors open the gate so the car can get out. And so it's a little more complicated than just adding 2 gates. When you just have 2 gates, no one can get stuck in there. They can get out. When you have 4, they can get stuck. So you have to have a whole bunch of safety equipment associated with that.
I say it's on them. They're stuck in there. They shouldn't have been there.
And then, got a bullet point in here, annual maintenance fees to BNSF are to be determined. And we were told at one point in time by BNSF that cost was gonna be about $35,000 a year per gate. So an additional $70,000 a year. Now, Brian, before we panic, Brian's had conversations with the city who just did this on, is it C Street that they just did this on?
C Street, yeah.
And they don't pay anything annually per gate. So the costs seem to be all over the board on this quad gate. So when you ask the question is why it moved to 2020 is because we're really trying to figure this out. We've got a lot of different conflicting information.
And basically, the railroad's not being very
well
helpful.
They are, but it's a process. So
It's a process, all right. I'm sorry, but these kind of things aggravate me. It's something that can
Understood.
be simplified, and people make it difficult when it shouldn't be, and it costs all the taxpayers of Whatcom County money when they're difficult, and they should not be, because we're trying to make things safer, and we're trying to help them as well as the people in this county, and they're not being very helpful to us, I don't think.
Understood. Just on that point, what I understand is the costs that they provide are usually pretty conservative, in speaking with the city and other consultants. So, we're working through the process of.
No, I understand it, and it's
So-
nothing meant towards you, but
I didn't take it that way, but.
every
yeah.
time we turn around, the railroad is costing the taxpayers dollars in this country, and they're making a lot of money off of the ground they're on. And I, for one, am not very happy about it when it comes to things like this, and they can't expedite things to help us get something done that needs to be done. The noise is their fault, not ours.
Why don't we jump to the next slide, which shows why we think the passive improvements are going to be problematic.
Okay.
See the next one after that.
This one, oh, next one, okay.
This one. So you see a lot of green on here, and you see some of that green conflicts with the community boating center. It goes right through their property, so we'd have to significantly modify their leasehold. You can also see there'll be some modifications to how the ferry traffic comes in to our ferry holding area.
Be a tough corner.
Yeah,
Yes.
a really tough corner. And then, the fact that we're utilizing the, existing tenant's property just for some very small amount of access to a boat launch probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But this is why we think it's problematic to go to do the passive improvements. There's just the turn radiuses and the way the properties line up are just not conducive to doing that.
Right. Thank you, Rob. Okay, last of the port crossings is the FMIP Building 5. And again, this is a private, not a public crossing. FMIP 5, the tenant there uses that crossing to launch and recover vessels. The prior diagnostic meeting several years ago identified signage as the crossing improvements there. And working with the Federal Railroad Administration and the city and others to make sure that what was identified years ago still holds. And if it doesn't, if standards have changed, to understand what's ahead there. So all in an effort to make sure that we understand what improvements are needed, that they're quiet zone compliant, and figure out what that schedule and cost is. So
Because this is a private crossing, we think this one's the easiest one to get done. I think BNSF has said it's going to be a pretty easy one to get done. The city agrees with that, so this one probably doesn't need a ton of time. I think the one that we are hung up on most is that the ferry crossing, what we call the ferry crossing there,
Right.
just because there doesn't seem to be an easy solution to it except for the quad gates.
It might be cheaper to dredge the little bay out and put the boat launch on the other side.
Well, it's funny you say that because one of the things we talked about was just closing that crossing altogether and routing the traffic all through the ferry terminal area, so you wouldn't have to even have that crossing. There's some substantial cost to doing that, but it may end up being cheaper in the long run if you're talking about $70,000 a year in gate upkeep.
That would eliminate the community boating center's current ability to use that property?
No,
they would
no,
enter the
they'd
other
have to drive all the way down to the cruise terminal, enter there, and then drive back towards the community boating center.
Could you turn around there with the boat? You could still.
Yeah, we'd have to, the engineers would have to draw all that up. It's something we just tossed around very initially. We didn't do a ton of homework on that because it would be inconvenient for folks. It would close a crossing.
I don't know if that'll work with the amount of traffic for the ferry trying to
Well,
get through that.
Fridays would be tough.
Yeah.
That one day a week would be really tough, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth exploring, I imagine, as long as it doesn't eliminate access completely. I mean, these costs seems like they could spiral on that one.
And that's kind of where we're at is trying to really pinpoint what those costs could be. And working with BNSF is, we say, okay, this is what we'd like to do. And so they take that, in the case of a quad gate, they take that and prepare a design and a cost estimate, as well as the annual maintenance fees. So that's work that's out of our hands.
Well, I mean, this isn't the first one they've done around the country. It's a big country. I mean, it's like, can't they just pick it off what the one cost over here? I mean, I'm sorry, it just frustrates me. This is why nothing ever gets done, is because of things like this. The people you work with, I mean, it can't be that difficult, can it?
Now, are there two quiet zones?
Take away your coffee.
Is
I don't
there,
drink coffee.
Are there two quiet zones we're working toward, one in Fairhaven and then one in Bellingham proper?
The waterfront quiet
The
zone.
waterfront. So those would be separate quiet zone applications?
They would be, yes. And again, the port does not have any crossings in the waterfront. Those are all done by the city.
Who else would be impacted by closing that crossing? Just the boat?
Looking
The
for-
boat launch.
For Mr. Warder, it's the boat launch and the commuting boating center.
Coast Guard?
Ferry staging traffic would have to be reconfigured. Coast Guard.
Oh, Coast Guard.
I mean,
Coast Guard wouldn't be that big of a
It
deal.
is a strategic entrance to that property
Yep.
there. I mean, it's just, I mean, we're talking about this, but I don't think it makes sense to close that crossing, because there's only one way into that place other than one, you need two ways in and out. You do it for the amount of business that's gonna go on there.
It didn't get very far in internal discussions, but it is something worth, I think, exploring and bringing back as an option because, like I said, the costs for the 4-gate crossing are just getting exorbitant. So for that amount of money, we might be able to redo the whole area and make it more convenient for everybody.
Well, it would really help if the railroad would tell us exactly where we're at monetarily.
And, I'll start getting involved. We have some contacts at the railroad as well that are more political than business, and we'll start talking with them and seeing if we can't pin them down. The
Promise
federal,
I'll calm down a little.
Thank you. The Federal Railroad folks and some of our community members have been really helpful on this. And I think it's one of those deals where we just got to put a lot of pressure on them, and we need to start putting a little more. So this was just an update today. I think this is the last slide.
Yeah, just, we've got, just a quick figure just to show you the crossing at FMIP 5, if you're not familiar with it. And then just a recap here. So the Port and City are working on the Fairhaven Quiet Zone. That end date, is in sight. It's just a process of getting there. The BNSF certifies all crossings meet the quiet zone requirements. The process is, once we have all the improvements completed in the quiet zone, BNSF would certify those crossing improvements that they meet the quiet zone requirements. The city would submit a notice of quiet zone establishment. BNSF establishes quiet zone no earlier than 21 days after the notice is submitted. And then, just an important item that I've been told many times is, for the safety of the public, for the safety of everyone, the quiet zone doesn't mean the whistles stop altogether. They'll still sound the whistle if there's a dangerous condition. So it doesn't eliminate the whistles, but it should minimize them quite a bit. So
They might have him clarify if that railway worker's sitting in his truck or not watching.
yeah.
So if he's parked there.
And Brian, for the waterfront, those 5 or 6, I think, in the
6.
waterfront, do we know the schedule they are on?
I do, just in talking with the city. That one, they're scheduling, I believe, one every 3 years based on their funding sources. So what I understand from the city is that they have some scheduled and others are not yet based on the funding available. But as far as a date when the waterfront quiet zone crossing would be completed, that's not yet determined, is what I understand from the city.
Because BNSF is the Laurel Street crossing included in that? Because BNSF
It is.
is working on that one currently, so that one will be checked off.
The Laurel was built to be a quiet zone crossing. If you go there, you'll see the non-mountable medians. There is a bunch of gates. It kind of looks like a quad gate, but 2 of those gates are strictly for bicycle and pedestrian access, and then 2 are for car access. It's really well done, but it is designed to be a quiet zone.
So we'll then have 5 that are
Right.
waiting. And one's been scheduled and the others are yet to be.
Let's see, so I believe C
Street's
Street's done, Laurel's done. That leaves F Street, which I think is next on the city's list, if I'm not mistaken. Then that leaves Wharf Drive near the end of Cornwall, as well as Cornwall Beale Memorial.
So there's,
They treat Cornwall Beale Memorial as one crossing. Beale Memorial is the access to our shipping terminal, and the other one obviously is Cornwall, but they treat that as one because they're right next, adjacent to each other. Wharf is separate.
I think we also have Central, I think is the one I left out there.
Central, yep, by jalapenos there, yep.
Yep,
there's a lot.
there are a lot, yep.
Okay.
So we don't necessarily have the most complicated crossings that we're working on, but we certainly have two of the more complicated. So working through it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I requested the update because I couldn't tell heads or tails on where we are and where the city is, and so this really helps. I want to, there's a number of advocates here in the room who have been pushing both the city and Port on this for a number of years. And I guess the message is we're doing our part here. We've funded, and our staff is doing a lot of good work, a lot of hair pulling also on this, and we're going to keep doing this. And I think the end is in sight for the Fairhaven section. The waterfront zone is going to be a bit longer.
A bit further out, correct.
So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Commissioner Bell?
I just want to make sure, Mr. Brown, you got your questions answered? Mr. Brown, you did?
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Brian.
Okay,
I think I spoke enough already. Huh?
thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, with that, I'd like to close the meeting until 20 minutes to 6. We'll take a 10-minute break here.
We do not currently have anyone signed up for public comment.
Is anyone wish to speak on a subject that has not signed up? Now's the time to speak, or you have to listen to us for another hour. All right, that done. We'll move on to our action items.
Commissioners, we have one more presentation.
I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself.
So Commission, Maury Ingram is here with the Whatcom Community Foundation to talk about a proposal that her and several other community leaders have come up with for the Lignan parcel.
Good evening. Thank you all. Commissioner Briscoe, I thought maybe you got enough out of the public comment and you just want to take a vote right now. That's okay with me.
You might have another round coming through for the second
I
public
know.
comment period.
I know, it's not a good sign. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to come and share a little update with you this evening. I've had the opportunity to speak with each of you individually about the initial concept for the Lignan site, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then bring you up to speed on the way the concept has evolved. And a disclaimer that I know you all will appreciate. You've all been at this stage of a project, and I think it's really critical to remind people that whenever we're at this stage of especially a bigger community project, that we are often talking about somebody else's property, somebody else's program, somebody else's something. And so I'm going to do that probably quite a bit this evening. It doesn't mean that we have commitments from a number of organizations, but we have been having conversations, and I think it's really important for you to hear from the folks specifically that we've gotten permission to use their name, but for others, there are a lot of, when there are general statements, there are a lot of individual organizations behind those generalities. Also, in the packet that I gave you, you'll see not only the slides that I'll share tonight, but also some additional information, and I just wanted to minimize the number of dense text-packed slides that you all had to wade through this evening. So, first, just a little overview. I'm going to talk very briefly about the Community Foundation and why we're involved in this initiative. Again, talk a little bit about the origins of the project, which is the local food campus idea. Talk a little bit about how that has evolved over time. Some of the things that make now a particularly opportune moment for us to all seize this potential idea as a community. And then talk a little bit in a very preliminary way about financing concepts and then next steps. So the Community Foundation at this juncture is proposing to serve as the master developer, not as the foundation itself, but through an LLC that we're in the process of creating that will make it possible for us to make sure that the mission or the purpose of this project is really consistent throughout its efforts. As you all know, you often have to sharpen your pencil throughout a project, and it's easy to lop off really important elements because something needs to pencil. And while this project will need to pencil, we also need to make sure that we don't lose a lot of purpose along the way. So the Community Foundation has a mission to amplify the force of philanthropy by connecting people, ideas, and resources. Oh, we're on autopilot. There we go. So that communities flourish. And our very simple vision is that everyone who lives here thrives. Whoops, excuse me. We are laser focused, as you can see, on a laundry list of things that make this a healthy community. And hopefully you'll notice a little public port art there, so thank you for your earlier support of the new project from the fourth graders. So I'm joking when I say that we're laser focused. Obviously, this is the kitchen sink in terms of community and economic development, but that is sort of the breadth and depth of the Community Foundation. We care about literally every aspect of what makes this a wonderful place to live, and we know that there's always an opportunity to improve. We use a variety of strategies. We do a lot of community partnership work. We've had the opportunity to work with the port in the past and look forward to doing so again. We do a lot to put dollars to work, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. We do a lot to support the nonprofit sector. We have, as you know, some incredible nonprofit organizations in this community, and we try to make sure that we support them in sort of getting better at the business of the work that they do while they focus on the content specialty. We also work with hundreds of donors throughout the community who care about this place. We work with folks of modest means all the way up to folks who are literally making multi-million-dollar gifts to the Community Foundation because they love this place and the people in it. And then finally, we're out there advocating, including through this project, for different ways to make this an equitable community for everybody that lives here. So I mentioned putting dollars to work. This graphic is kind of the full spectrum of ways you can put your money to work. And for us, it's grants. For individuals, think of it as a gift. Those are all an investment in some way to make the community or the planet a better place. And of course, we're best known for our grant making, but over the last 8 to 10 years, we've been doing more and more to try to find different ways to put our dollars to work. So we've made in some cases, direct loans. We've done loan guarantees to help reduce the cost of capital for affordable housing and for local food system work. And we're even talking right now about a potential equity investment. So those are things that are really critical from our point of view, and it helps us to really leverage and recycle the gifts that we receive as well from the community. So first, I want to note that this is not an exotic stock photo from some fabulous international destination. This is a local Whatcom County meal prepared, grown by local Whatcom County farmers and prepared by local Whatcom County chef and their team. As I mentioned, the origins of this project, which we're calling the Millworks, was a local food campus. And we really wanted to, we've been doing work in the local food system for a very long time. It's not news to all of you that the local food system here continues to develop and evolve. We see an amazing array of not only restaurants, but caterers, a number of very well-renowned chefs, and then a lot of really impressive growers, all the way from commodity producers down to real artisan, small-scale farmers. In addition, and I should also note that, as you're aware, Team Whatcom has included food and ag as part of its economic development focus. So this is, again, very much in line with the Port's work already, along with its economic development partners. So as I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work at the Community Foundation for 10 plus years in the local food system, largely through grants, but also through other means. These are probably a lot of familiar names to all of you. So what is Local Food Campus? Really, the idea is that it's an opportunity to co-locate a lot of different uses that are related to food and agriculture. And the benefits are myriad, but we've sort of distilled them down to 3 components. It's a way to really create some natural synergies. As many of you know, I'm a former restaurant owner, and when you want to be near other restaurants, you don't want to be the only one. People often think you want to be the only option, but in most cases, any kind of business, that's really not a benefit. It's more of a deficit. So a lot of great opportunities come out of just that proximity to one another. Also, that co-location creates opportunity for innovation and collaboration, and it also gives us an opportunity to really shine a light on the local food system, on healthier food, and we want to really make sure that we're doing that all the way from preschool on up to adulthood and make sure that people have access to the kind of food that they want to consume. We also know that when we think about uses, Bellingham Technical College, for example, the single most common request that they get from their culinary arts students is help in starting a food truck, because it's a very low-cost point of entry into business ownership. So that's one of the things that's incorporated along with food carts, and I have to credit Don Goldberg for the food cart edition. So that is something that we think will really be an exciting way to bring a retail component and a real community access point into an also largely light industrial use for the community. And that kind of mix of uses is really critical, and you'll hear more about that as I describe more of the project. We also know that we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the food space, and again, this is an opportunity to support them not only through shared kitchen space and access to processing and cool and cold storage, but also greater access to a lot of the organizations in the community that are doing incredible work supporting those businesses and helping them start up and helping them thrive. Sustainable Connections, Northwest Ag Business Center, local chambers, and a variety of others. Also, we've got an opportunity for workforce training. That might be through local higher ed institutions. It might be through organizations like the Opportunity Council, so there's lots of potential there. So the current footprint for the local food campus is about 40,000 square feet, and we do have an agreement or a commitment, I should say, from the Northwest Ag Business Center to actually manage the local food campus portion of the facility. So this is not the Community Foundation trying to run a lot of businesses. This is really trying to set the stage so that we can partner and bring on board organizations that are really well suited to fit that role. And I'm not going to go through the detail of each of these, but as you can tell, there are a variety of shapes and sizes and styles of local food campuses across the country, popping up all over the place. The closest one to us that you'll see here is in Portland. It's a property called The Red. And so these are drawing a lot of attention and a lot of resource, and they create more benefits than just those that I've listed for the local food system. So the big vision that we have gleaned from through a mix of inputs is that we really want to focus generally on economic development, job creation and retention, and job training. We also want to make sure that we're building more wealth in the community for farmers and other producers. We want to make sure that when we think about the flagship project for the waterfront, that this is right up there at the top because it matters to us and as much as it does to anyone in the community that our access to the waterfront is a real celebration of the site and really does it justice. And finally, we want to make sure, again, as I said, that we have key access to healthy and fresh local food for folks who live and visit here. So in order to inform this vision, we had our consulting team, New Venture Advisors, which is a phenomenal group with tremendous amount of experience in local food system work all across the country. They did interviews with over 40 people from almost 30 organizations. So this is not the Community Foundation kind of sitting in our little bubble or our little corner of the world trying to figure out what would work. This is really continues to be informed by folks that are really in the field. It builds on a tremendous amount of both effort and assets over the years. We've got, and I'm again not going to walk through all these, but research and also plans that have been developed by everybody from the county to City of Bellingham and others. And then again, as I noted, 2 of the 7 key industries for Choose Whatcom include food and beverage and agriculture. So this is right in the sweet spot for all of that work. So how has the project evolved? Originally, we thought about an adaptive reuse of the gorgeous building that is the Lignan building. And as you all wisely decided, perhaps better to just raise that and start from scratch so that we can actually have something that is truly built to suit. And I'm going to frame this one for Rob. It's his favorite. And you also expressed a desire to get more density on that 3-acre site, which of course is an appropriate goal. So for us, rather than scrapping the idea or looking for another location because this is the right spot for this project, we really saw it as an invitation to think bigger. And so that's what we did. What kinds of uses could be compatible? What else could the site accommodate? And again, how could we enhance that gateway to the waterfront? So lots of partners and endorsers, and again, I'm not going to list a lot of folks by name until we have formal letters of intent and formal endorsements in place, but the Opportunity Council is, of course, a key player in this for a variety of reasons. We've also got, as I mentioned, the Northwest Ag Business Center and a whole host of other programs and organizations, including some private enterprises, for-profit enterprises that we've talked with about the potential for this site, not only for the food campus, but for some of the other uses that are envisioned as well. And in expanding beyond the local food campus concept, we really wanted to address the topic that you heard come up quite a bit in public comment, and that is workforce housing. How do we make sure that on this property, in what is a job center for the community, what is a center for services and amenities and public transportation, how do we make it easier for people to, or even possible for more people to actually afford to live downtown? And this is a perfect solution to that effort. So I just listed the reasons that this is a fabulous site for all of those things. We want to make sure that we maximize that. And this concept drawing that you see here is very preliminary. It's just to give you a sense of what the uses might look like. The upper section is the local food campus. The building in the lower left would be mixed use with a couple of floors of commercial and 5 floors of workforce housing on top. And then the parking lot you'll see has some little colored blocks in it, and that would be sort of a rodeo for food trucks and food carts, so that, again, it's a very active space all the time and doesn't just kind of roll up its gates at 5 o'clock. So timing and next steps. There are a number of things, a number of factors that really make, again, now precisely the right time. Just today, we actually released, in cooperation with an organization called Project Equity, some research that we commissioned, and this is statewide research. It looks at the number of baby boomer-owned businesses with employees, and I want to emphasize that. And why is that important? Because we know that nationally, at least, 6 out of 10 business owners plan to exit ownership in the coming 10 years. So that matters to us because while some folks may easily find a successor family generation, they may find a local buyer, others may not. And they may either sell to an out-of-area owner who could relocate, who could scale down the local operations, or they might not be successful in selling at all and might simply close. So we have an employee ownership initiative that I won't spend a lot of time on, but the research shows that we've got over 2,000 businesses in Whatcom County alone, and the number is more than 57,000 for the entire state that are owned by baby boomers. And so that's a factor for us. It's a factor in Bellingham, it's a factor in Sumas, in Blaine, in Ferndale, and in the unincorporated areas of the county. So we want to get out in front of that as much as we possibly can in order to give people all the information and resources they need to make the right decisions about how they exit and what that looks like for the rest of the community. So I mention it here because one of the uses that we think would be prime for the mixed-use building would be a statewide center for employee ownership that could be here in Bellingham. And for folks who might think, oh my gosh, a cooperative, I could never do that, or what's an ESOP? I just wanted to give you an example of some of the very well-known companies that already exist in Whatcom County, some of which have been in employee ownership for quite a long time, and others that are newer to the party. So this is a real thing. There are a tremendous number of benefits, and you'll see some additional information in your packets about the benefits of employee-owned companies when they're set up and transitioned in a way that actually makes them viable and beneficial for not only the seller, but also the employees that are taking over the property. Another, of course, we've talked already about affordable housing. I'm not going to belabor this. You all know the numbers. You know that there are a significant portion, over 37% of the residents of Whatcom County spend more than the recommended maximum of 30% of their income on housing. And there are a number of ways that that plays out in the community. And again, I'm not going to review all of that for you because I know you're well aware of it. And then finally, a couple of other elements. One, opportunity zone legislation that was passed as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which brings with it significant tax benefits and incentives for eligible investors. And the waterfront and downtown are one of 3 opportunity zones in Whatcom County. We see this, and I want to thank the Port for co-sponsoring an opportunity zone forum along with the City of Bellingham, Lummi Nation, and the Community Foundation. We had almost 100 people at that forum, and we heard from the folks from the Department of Commerce that this community actually had the largest showing of any of the forums that they've done across the state so far. So we were really pleased to have a good showing. So what that tells us is that there's a lot of curiosity, and the thing that we heard in a survey after the forum was that people wanted information about specific opportunities. What would it look like? What could I invest in, and what does that mean for me? And so this is one of, we hope, many answers to that question and request from the community. And then lastly, the Department of Commerce grant that the Port of Bellingham received. Congratulations on that $250,000 grant for affordable housing on a brownfield site. What a great idea. So I think we hope that that's something that can be leveraged in order to advance this project. And then economic development and job opportunities. I'm not going to stand up here and give you a specific number of the jobs that we're going to create. We did get some preliminary projections from our food system consultant, and they're projecting over time, probably just for the local food campus, about 150 or more jobs. And then, of course, there will be others through the Center for Employee Ownership that are retained and or created, and a host of other things that are going to happen. Those numbers will come as the details get fleshed out for the project. But I think suffice it to say that there is significant opportunity here, and the way we're thinking about it is that it's a mix of direct economic development activity combined with really necessary conditions to support a healthy local economy, and that means that people can live near where they work, and we have some of these other services and amenities close by and centralized for folks. So what's the money going to look like? I'm going to get as unspecific as I can. The depth of these bars means literally nothing. All I want to convey here is that we know that there are grant monies available both locally and regionally and nationally that will be brought to bear on this project. Those are some of the things that are going to help ensure that we can create workforce housing, that we can create some permanent affordability for some of the other uses that I've talked about. But also there may be equity investments, opportunities for people to actually have a stake in the project, and then also other forms, potentially bonds and certainly loans to get the project all the way to fruition. So again, no numbers associated with this, and again, the thicknesses are merely to show you a little variety, not to give you any indication of actual scale for the project. But we're definitely in active conversation with a lot of people that are interested in the project about what they might be interested in doing as we proceed. So finally, one of the things I mentioned, we're in the process of forming an LLC, which I anticipate will be concluded tomorrow. We also are looking forward to a sense of timing from the port around the demolition and the cleanup for the property. We want to figure out whether, again, there's any opportunity to leverage the planning grant that the port received, which we're very excited about. We look forward to the opportunity to get a memorandum of understanding going forward so that we can actually start to invest even more. I want to acknowledge and thank RMC Architects, which has already done significant amount of pro bono work on now 2 phases of this concept, which is a tremendous amount of investment on their part, and I think also speaks to what they believe is a great project for the community. And we're continuing to work with not only all the folks I talked about around the local food campus concept, but affordable housing providers and a variety of other groups around some of the other uses. And we're going to be working toward letters of intent and other forms of endorsement. We also are looking forward to really engaging more of the community so that folks can weigh in on how they think we should refine. I appreciate Councilmember Barker noting that there's already been a lot of planning, so the work that I'm presenting here has, we think, been built on a tremendous amount of planning, including waterfront work, but we also know that it's really important for the community to be able to come in and share their viewpoints on everything that's been developed to date. And then, again, finalizing the concept and the building design and getting all the money in place. Anything I can answer for you?
Mr. Shepherd.
So Maury, in a best case scenario, and I know there's a number of different considerations we have some cleanup work that has to be done on the site regardless of its use and other factors. How far out could we envision having a development take place here?
Completed?
Begun.
Well, I would say that I would envision that we could be underway in 2020.
Wow.
I mean, clearly there's permitting required, but in terms of lining things up, there's a lot of enthusiasm around this project, and I think as soon as we get some pen to paper in terms of agreements, we'll be able to move pretty quickly. We have a consultant identified that we're going to bring on to project manage who's got a significant amount of experience in this type of area, so I think that's going to be really helpful.
Okay. And for the funding, would you be coming back to the port and asking for us to participate in the funding, or do you envision making all the financial contributions a project of the master developer and it's their job to do?
Definitely the former. We want to make sure, again, this is a community project, so part of our request to the port will be, we're bringing certain things to the party. We hope that the port will roll up its sleeves and identify what you can bring in terms of financial and other resources as well. And I think that's going to have a lot to do with what those final agreements look like. But absolutely, we're going to be working with all potential partners.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate that this has been a multi-year, extensive stakeholder process. You've worked with lots and lots of people to generate the vision around this, and then have been flexible to really tune your initial vision to some current needs that we have. I think everybody recognizes we had lots of public comment around the need for workforce housing. And I'm really excited that you've found some really productive ways to implement that as part of this vision. So thank you for your flexibility. And I mean, the first time I heard about this project was almost 2 years ago. And that means it had already been in the works for at least a year prior. So we're at least 3 to 4 years in process of moving this vision along, getting stakeholder vision and input from a variety of sectors. So it's not something that is certainly by any means newly hatched.
Absolutely.
Okay. And other than that, I just appreciate the comprehensive approach to economic sustainability for the community. It brings in a lot of different factors that tie in both with our agricultural community, both with job creation here locally. Anytime someone talks about 150 jobs in one location, that gets my attention. And if we can also put people to give them places to live that meet a workforce housing shortage, we are starting to really get to an exciting opportunity. And I guess the last thing I like is that it creates an opportunity for those who don't know. This parcel is unique, and it's unique because it's part of the waterfront district, but it is one of the only significant parcels that the public, through the port, contains ownership of. And the rest of the waterfront district, the buildable land down there, is mostly optioned to the Harcourt. And so this is a unique opportunity for us to see a project and run with it and set a different development timescale that we can use to say, here we can see investment allocated, we can see something come and really drive interest and use of that waterfront district. And I think the more people we see down there, the more business activity, the more people who are living down there, is just going to make this an attractive place for Harcourt to also spend their time and invest their money and resources, because we're setting a good example for them to follow. And I know one of the constant questions we get about the waterfront is, why is it taking so long? And it takes a long time for a lot of reasons, but I see this as part of that, getting us cresting that wave of making the rest of the development incentivized, just because of the use and the activity and the interests that more people in a physical location will bring. So to me that's another significant benefit of this concept.
Thank you.
I don't have any other questions at the moment.
Commissioner Bell.
Was there a question in that last part?
There was not. It was more just a comment. I was asked to give a question, but
that was good.
ended up just rambling.
So there's no part of rolling up your sleeves that involves money. I mean, that's a digging down deep issue, but we will work with you on this.
We see philanthropy in a very different way.
I just want to say, on a personal note, I've not seen anybody with better vision or more vision than I have you. I've not seen anybody more tenacious than I have you. I have not seen anybody that I want to help more than I have you. I think this is an amazing vision for the waterfront, and I think I've told you before, you've got my support on this endeavor. Any way we can help, we will. And I just am thankful that you're here to push this forward. I think this not only helps us here, but I also think it helps the farmers in the county deliver things to the waterfront. But I also don't want to minimize the fact that this is going to make a very interesting waterfront. It's going to do more than just be condos and houses, and this is going to make us stand out. And I'm pleased to support you on this.
Thank you.
I'm done.
So this is the best part about sitting in the middle. By the time those two get done, I don't have much to ask. He said and what he said.
I guess we're done.
Pretty close. No, this is pretty exciting. Movement for me is always good. I like to see things happen. I'm very frustrated sitting in this position that things don't happen faster, and that was probably fairly evident tonight in some of the things I said. But I think this is a great project, and as Ken said, we'll do what we can.
Great, thank you.
And it was a very, very well put together presentation. Thank you.
Well,
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. I'd like to put forward a suggestion that we move to have our staff work with Maury and her team to figure out what an MOU would look like. And I think that's probably the next steps for us. We probably need to have a motion on that to have our team really continue the work they've already been doing. Particularly Brian Jean again, that grant is really provides some springboard for the rest of this work to hopefully follow from, and allows us to put that grant into productive use. So I think the next step would be a motion to have our teams work together to start drafting that MOU.
Commissioner, I think the grant needs to be applied for, or at least, yeah, why don't you tell us what it needs?
That's right. We've applied for the grant. We have to formally accept it, and we're waiting for this kind of direction actually to be to really focus our scope for that grant. And actually, we've now been coordinating with the Department of Ecology on a kickoff meeting that will probably happen by getting all the groups together. We weren't able to get together till mid-May, but this will be what we can inform them on and help develop that scope. Then we can accept that grant formally. That requires commission action, probably early June is likely the timeframe that would come forward. So that would be about the timing that we could then in earnest start working. You know, we could potentially even consider bringing an MOU together at that time as well. So something to consider.
So knowing that, we don't need a motion to do an MOU. I see you all concur with that. I can certainly do that. We can put on an agenda in the future to vote on. It will have to be obviously voted on to be approved, but I can certainly work with Maury's group to put something together in the meantime.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, that's what we'll do then.
Make it so, number one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to, I can go action items now, huh?
All right.
Okay. Action item one, Diane, if you please.
A motion by the commission approving the airport ground lease between the Port of Bellingham and Alpha Distributors Incorporated for the former Washington Air National Guard, or WANG site, at the Bellingham International Airport.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sunil Harman, Director of Aviation with Shirley McPherson, Director of Real Estate. Please come on up.
Calling for backup, see that?
Okay. I had my glasses off. I think you moved the location.
Wang right there?
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and right down here.
So taking up your desire for movement, Mr. President, I think you'll be glad to hear that after 2 years of significant hard work, and it really takes a team to bring this sort of momentous item to you, I'd like to call the other people by way of introduction, if you don't mind. There were a number of participants. Brian Gowron was instrumental in helping us with the environmental issues. Of course, our own counsel, Frank Schmelik, did an amazing job in finally crafting, what was an acceptable lease for the developer. We also had from real estate, Judy Harvey and Noah Carlson. We had Terry Elahi, who worked on the appraisal for the project, and our own airport project manager, Jonathan Perrault, who saw this thing from the request for proposals all the way to today, where we're standing before you asking for authorization to execute a land lease. And this is a significant project in a number of ways. When I first went to Rob more than 2 years ago and said, we've got to do things differently. We don't have the funds, and most airports are going towards third-party public-private partnerships for GA projects. It didn't take a lot to convince Rob to go this route. So really appreciate the vision that he brought, the leadership. And then it was just the grind of finding an appropriate partner. And I think we found a great partner in the Alpha Distributors Group. And Vanessa Oliver, who's a presence at the airport, has been a presence at least the entire time I've been there and much longer, has been a great partner, both in the FBO side, but she's bringing in a significant amount of horsepower to this project. I'd like to recognize her, and maybe after we vote on this item, get a photograph to memorialize the occasion. So Vanessa.
Hi, good evening. You guys go on late.
Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners, Executive Director, Directors. Thank you very much. Jonathan, thank you. I'm getting to know everybody pretty well these days, so I appreciate your support, especially with general aviation. General aviation is a different type of transportation that we're all accustomed to. Most people are aware of commercial airlines, and that's how they travel. Well, there's air ambulances, there's medical flights, rescue flights, private charters, corporate aviation. There's the aviator who buys a little airplane and just flies it from here to Portland for lunch. There's so much more to the airport than people actually see. So thank you for your support. We're excited for the project. We're excited to move forward. And with your support, we'll start jumping into all the hoops and things we get to go on to next. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, you see the location plan, and I think you're pretty familiar with the Washington Air National Guard site. It's been a site that's been decommissioned over 12 years now when it was turned over to the port. The site is located right behind our aircraft rescue and firefighting facility, adjacent to, and it's at approximately the intersection of West Baker View Road and Williamson Way. It's on what we call the beachfront because it is directly accessible to the airfield. And you can see the layout of the facilities there behind the aircraft rescue firefighting station. What we've proposed in the RFP was to develop roughly this 8 1/8 acre site into a corporate business hangar complex. And that's how it was advertised. So the site's footprint is identified in the red boundary, and it's actually been adopted into the airport's master plan with the general site plan developed as you see it there. So just to the east of Williamson Way, we'll reroute Williamson Way at some point in the future. There is a taxiway that goes clear through and is allowed then to go into a phase 2 for some future development for a general aviation complex. The largest buildings here, in rough numbers, approximately 40,000 square feet. The smallest buildings, about 5,000 square feet. Overall, the project is estimated at build-out to be approximately $15 million in current dollars. They have a 5-year period to realize the project. And the agreement terms, I'll just let Shirley cover those.
Hi, Commissioners. For the record, Shirley McFerrin, Real Estate Director. So we are super excited about this transaction. Just a few highlights. The area is approximately 8.16 acres. The initial term is 25 years. We've offered as part of the lease 3 5-year renewals, so it'll total of 40 years. Year one, we're asking you to approve a rate of $48,250, and what that represents is 25% of fair market value. Year two, we would look to increase the base rent based on an annual escalation of 3% until the first day of the 6th year, or when the development is substantially complete, whichever occurs first. And then, beginning with the first day of year 6, we would be at full fair market value, which is $193 in annual rent. And that represents an appraised value of $6 a square foot using our standard 9% rate of return. So that highlights the deal points.
Thank you.
So Vanessa touched on the importance of general aviation. It acts as an incubator, a catalyst at the airport. On average, every takeoff and landing that's a non-commercial takeoff and landing represents about $11.80 in revenue. General aviation activity has been up over the last 2 years. So nationally, it represents $150 billion. At our airport, it accounts for about 11.5% of our operating revenues on an annual basis. This agreement will increase the operating revenues by about 3% beginning in the 6th year, estimating growth between now and then. And it does foster, when I describe it as an incubator, when you draw good business and corporate aviation to the airport, then there are other opportunities to develop areas on the west side that we've identified for potential development. As you've seen in the master plan, the logistics center, the innovation campus, all of those things become accessible because the people that generally utilize airports have the means to look at potential development as a economic opportunity. We intend to have high-quality facilities to attract new businesses to the region. So I think this is a turning point at the airport in general aviation, and I hope you'll approve the lease.
Mr. Shepherd, questions?
Let's see. Do you have any projections yet on, job creation through this project? I know there's probably a lot hard to identify.
It is hard to quantify. There's a new economic study that's being done for airports by the state. We should be able to quantify. The numbers that we have date back to 2012. And typically, every general aviation operation accounts for 0.10% of the workforce. But this is a sparse development in itself. These are places to house airplanes, very expensive airplanes. But there's a potential to have activities here on this site that would be viewed as industrial maintenance type activities. We could have maintenance facilities. We could have governmental uses if there's an expanded role for government. So it's a variable, fungible number, and I don't want to get into too much of detail with what we would generate in terms of jobs.
Well, it's exciting because we only have so much control over the commercial side, and it's nice to try and work on the general aviation side where we're able to, see our work happen maybe a little bit more quicker, and see some fruition from these efforts. And I think it's, we incentivize, we ask, we try and attract other runs and routes, and it's a hard process to go through, and it takes quite a bit of time and money, and it doesn't always produce lasting routes. And this is certainly a sector that the general aviation is an existing important part of what we do, and it's exciting to see some ability to expand that. So, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Commissioner Bell.
I am wholeheartedly supportive of this. And we hope that we can create some activity out at Cherry Point or on the waterfront to fill it up. I feel like we've arrived, and this is a way of maybe growing into adulthood. People who will fly in to go to our food campus. I just think it's an amazing asset that you're bringing to the table, and I am completely in love with it. I also love the way you structured the lease, just to give them enough runway to get started. That's a huge, huge incentive, and well done, Shirley, on that aspect. And I can't wait. I'm done.
Well, Sunil, I would think it'd be safe for me to say this is about as excited as I've seen you at the podium about this project. And rightly so. Good job. Well, Shirley, I think both of you are very excited about this. It's a great project, and I'm glad it's coming to fruition. So.
And another tool in Don's toolbox to
Yes.
bring people in. I think this is a good thing.
And with that, gentlemen.
A motion by the Port Commission approving the airport ground lease between the Port of Bellingham and Alpha Distributors Incorporated for the former Washington Air National Guard site at the Bellingham International Airport.
Commissioner Bell.
Hardy, yes.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Yes.
Briscoe, aye, aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Passes 3-0.
If we can get a photograph with you and Rob and Vanessa and the team, that would be great, so we can put this in our newsletter and Vanessa in her brochure.
I thought you only did these pictures when I was gone.
It won't be in the post office like my other one will.
Judy, Brian. Come on, Judy.
Come on.
Yep.
You should do it up front where there's light.
Let's move us along.
Where you want to do it? You should do it over here, or there's enough light there. Yeah, over here, yes.
You gotta go.
Where's the, over there?
We'll both take it. Official backdrop of the board. Nice to meet you. Where are you guys based?
All right. Everybody say airplanes on 3. 1, 2, 3. Nice.
Both of them.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, let me see. What's that from?
So, moving along, Diane, if you please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with RMC Architects for the design of the Squalicum Harbor Fisherman's Pavilion project in the amount of $148,561, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $163,417.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Nichols, Senior Project Engineer. The Fisherman's Pavilion is intended to be a dual-purpose facility. During the wet winter months, it will provide covered dry area for commercial fishermen to work on their equipment and mend nets and various other tasks they have in a dry environment. During the summer, this facility would then be used for both public and private events. Just to give, let me back up real quick. Just to give a little detail, this is a conceptual design that was prepared earlier this year. The facility is intended to be a 3-sided structure that would be open on the front side with roll-up doors on the back side. And it'd be a fairly stripped-down building that would include water and sewer for sinks. And electrical lighting, and that would be the extent of what we're envisioning at this point. As we get through design, we'll vet out what all facilities the fishermen need, as well as what we need for events. The location of the pavilion is planned to go in the current location of the Squalicum storage yard with the building located on the south side of that property. That obviously would displace the existing storage yard, and we are currently in construction to construct a new storage yard that is located at 2800 Roeder. The schedule for construction, the storage yard relocation, as I said, is in process. We're currently waiting on a couple of outstanding permits to finish construction, and we anticipate being completed no later than September of 2019, assuming that we receive the permits on the schedule that we anticipate. The Fisherman Pavilion design would be completed during 2019, with construction to start in early 2020, with construction to be completed in September of 2020. We received 3 responses to our RFPS from qualified architectural firms. Due to their familiarity with this particular location, having designed the boathouse facility, as well as our past experience working with them, the Port staff is recommending award of this contract to RMC Architects of Bellingham, Washington. Are there any questions?
I'm still thinking. Commissioner Shepard.
Are you guys still planning to put solar on the roof? I know that was initially talked about.
That is absolutely something that we can look into, and we can include that in the design if that's desired.
There's no trees in the way.
That's very true.
Birds.
The photo that was on the very front of this presentation showed a roof monitor, and we decided that design, the RMC drew up a couple designs, and that was one of them, but we don't think that design works very well in that location because you get a lot of sideways rain, and one of the purposes of this is so the fishermen can work on their nets in the dry. So if you picture a flat roof, not flat, but without the monitor, you can see that solar panels would obviously fit very well on there.
That would certainly be my interest to activate a great roof space that could, and if that's built in, if that's designed from the start, then we know the roof is well designed for it and the electrical systems are as well.
Absolutely.
Tell me about the open-sided. How is that going to work for events? When we're, and what type of events do we envision having there? I know it would be a great location for the feast at Sea Feast, but what do we do about when it's raining or somebody wants to, are people going to have weddings here? What else?
There could be any sort of gathering, a large group picnic in that facility. As I mentioned, it's anticipated that this would be only used for events during the dry summer months. That said, we can incorporate designs into this that could provide roll-down doors on the front side if we're looking for a fully enclosed space. That obviously has some cost implications.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's a question for Tiffany on the
probably
need
answer
there.
to the advance better than I can.
Thank you.
So I always say there is no bad weather, only bad gear. So we have lots of events already down here with no covered space. I envision, I think RMC, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, said that was about a 600-person venue. So we would, of course, use it for 4th of July, which already exists down there. I also could see some other events that currently happen, April Brews Day, Brews by the Bay, using that facility during those months, May through September. As far as weddings and private events, we'll have to see who's daring enough to do it. But I think it could happen. I know Anacortes has a sort of an open kind of warehousey location that does pretty well for private events. So that's what we envision happening down there.
So I guess the question would be, does it need roll-up doors on that 4th side to really activate the type of events we think we want to house there and make and return revenue on?
Mm-hmm.
And does that outweigh the cost and other considerations?
Yeah, and I think one of the other considerations is the fisherman's ability to use that ingress, easy in and out without opening and closing doors. Be interested in.
And breaking them.
Yeah.
Combination of that use and cost, but specifically getting doors on that water side where the rain hits hard, so it's good.
You can imagine when a side of a building is open like this and you pull a vehicle in, it's much easier to pull it in and out when you're not having to line up with a certain door.
Yeah.
And the thinking was that the door would be orientated on the downwind side so that the wind side is hitting the closed side.
Yeah, if that's a concern, it's something that we could consider in the design to possibly make it so that we could add that enclosure at a later time. So we can definitely build that into the design without incurring a whole lot of additional cost at this time.
It may even be a soft wall, right? Maybe a tent-type wall that can be put up and taken down.
On which side?
On the current open side. So the other side is the current design where it's a hard design, but you have some sort of tent structure that you could just close up on that one side.
Flexible.
Almost like a curtain, yeah.
Yeah.
I would tear them down too.
We only put those up Memorial Day through Labor Day.
Right. Okay. Well, I want the building to be as functional as possible for all users, and I think you guys are working to strike a happy medium there, along with keeping the costs under control. Yeah, I know there's been a lot of excitement about this, and we've got a great event to make use of it.
Commissioner Bell?
I suppose paintball's out of the question.
No?
Probably be a substantial deposit.
Hello. Yeah, it could be interesting. Yeah, my only concern on this is one that you're going to hear again later in the evening, and that is that we seem to be doing all of our construction during the peak construction season. Construction costs could not be any higher than they are right now, and labor could not be any more short than it is right now. So there is a timing issue from my standpoint. I'm supportive of the project. I want to move forward with this part of it. At least you have my support for this this action item. But I do want to be mindful that economic development is probably most necessary when we go through a downturn, which I anticipate will happen. And so timing on these kind of capital expenditures are important to me. And the true cost of this construction is going to be more than it will be when we do go through a downturn. So I just want to be mindful of that. When we go through a recession, the port should be here to be able to do construction projects to keep people at work. And so I don't want to spend all of our money at one time. However, I've got to look Jim Kyle in the eye and say, this is going to be amazing, right? It's going to be amazing. So I'm supportive of tonight's action.
So a couple of questions. Have we considered a second story on the south side of this? Will it be built so that we could add a second story to the south half of the building?
That wasn't in the current designs. What were you thinking would go in the second story?
I mean, we talked about that a bit before in the early stages
Yeah.
of discussions about having something on the southern half of that building that could be used for offices or other things.
Are you thinking of a mezzanine level that would be an interior area for second floor use?
A second floor, so to speak. What's our overall height to the eave height going to be on this building? Do you have any recollection off all?
We haven't gotten that far in design. I would guess that we're probably 12 to 15 feet at the entrance. I would ballpark, but that's entirely up for consideration during design.
I guess what I'm getting after is there something we could add to this other than just making a regular flat building? I mean, we still need the room inside. Is there something we could add above on that south side that could bring us income to help pay for this overall, rather than just building a building and? I know we'd spoken about that, but we haven't seen them gone anywhere else with it.
Well, the original talks were of doing either residence or office up there above and help pay the costs. But as we explored it, parking became a real issue down there. As you know, parking can be a problem certain times when we have certain events, and any kind of use down there that adds parking to it we thought would be problematic. So we kept it very simple. We can certainly go back to the drawing board and have something drawn up that.
I mean, I don't want to hold this thing up. I'd
Yeah,
like to keep moving, like I always say. But if there was,
it certainly complicates it to put a second story on. This is a very, very simple structure as it's designed here. And if you're going to put a second story on it, it's going to get a lot more complicated and a lot more expensive. Now, obviously, you're going to have new revenue to offset that.
So I guess what I was getting at was not right now, but if we're gonna build this thing structurally, should we build it so that we can add another floor to it in the future if we wish to, without coming back and doing a bunch of major stuff to the building framework itself?
The building is presently envisioned would be a prefab metal building, which does not have a whole lot of expandability capacity.
Right.
We can reconsider that and design something that would be more suitable to expansion. I would imagine that we're probably looking at a pretty, a more substantial price tag for that kind of structure than for a prefab metal building.
Yeah, I'm thinking that through, we probably won't recover the revenue from the additional costs that it takes to put the infrastructure in.
You know, when we were initially talking about the residence or office up there, that's the conclusion we came to, was that the parking would be tough and the costs would be driven up to the point where it wasn't going to be feasible. I think if you were going to do a 4-story building there, maybe that's a different story, but you start to get in height issues there as well.
Can you build that high on the water there?
I don't know what the limit is there, probably 50 feet. Yeah. We can look into it, but my guess is it's 50 feet, yeah.
Okay. The other,
Cacophony of, we'll look into it from the audience.
the other question I had was restroom availability. I mean, as we put another structure up, are we gonna have a restroom? Is one incorporated into this, or?
There isn't, but the boathouse has sufficient restrooms that are available from the outside and the inside now. So there's public restrooms available there that are probably, I think, are underutilized. I don't think there's ever an issue about restaurants in that area. So I think I think we're okay there. Restrooms, did I say restaurants?
You did.
I was wondering, I was thinking,
There's all that food that Maury showed us earlier, made me hungry.
what kind of restaurants you're eating in, but.
And is that going to be okay for our rental uses to not have a restroom? No, I've got the wrong one, a restroom on site.
It comes to mind to me that people from, if they're doing an event there, they aren't gonna wanna run over to the boathouse from the event to use a restroom. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to, especially if the event is going on and it's raining outside. I don't wanna run over to the boathouse, which is, you know, what, block and a half away to use a restroom.
Certainly that's been considered. So the boathouse does have outside access restrooms. Also, there's restrooms at gate 5, right? And there's the ability to bring in portable restrooms if need be. It would be my desire as we talk through this that maybe potentially those could be added, but you know, depending on cost.
We can see how much that adds.
Yeah, let's look into the cost and see what that adds to it, so. I mean, as we grow into the future, more and more people, and we're trying to bring more and more people to our waterfront, those facilities are gonna get pretty taxed.
It's going to have very little energy use, so the solar panels will offset the cost of your bathroom, I think.
And we could desalinate for water, too.
Like
Put saltwater flush in.
Hey, good idea.
Any further questions, Commissioner Bell? I see you.
No, I also want to say I appreciate the fact that you chose the architect you chose for the reasons you chose him. I think that was a valid choice for those reasons.
Thank
So,
you.
Well done.
Commissioner Shepard, anything further?
No.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with RMC Architects for design of the Squalicum Harbor Fisherman's Pavilion project in the amount of $148,561, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $163,417.
Commissioner Shepard?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Carries 3-0.
Thank you. Are we doing C or are we doing 3 first? Okay. A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Dawson Construction of Bellingham, Washington for the Blaine Webb House No. 1 construction project in the amount of $3,388,179, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $3,726,997, and reallocate the capital improvement program budgets per the fiscal impact section.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Gibson, Project Engineer. As you'll recall from the Blaine Marine Industrial Area update that Brady Scott presented in March, the purpose of this project is to make room for a series of improvements on the Blaine Industrial Peninsula. These include rebuilding the Sawtooth Pier bulkhead, expanding the Walsh Marine Boatyard, and improving local access roads. Here's an aerial view of the Blaine Harbor with Web House 1 out on the peninsula. Since the port has 2 other web houses out on Milholland Avenue, the adjacent field was selected as the new location for Web House 1. This is the plan view of the proposed project. The scope of work includes the new web house in orange, as well as a new gravel storage area, regrading and repaving the driveways around web houses 2 and 3, replacing the water main in Milholland Avenue, and constructing a gravel waterfront trail between Gate 1 and the boat launch restrooms. Here's a full view of the proposed gravel trail, which will follow the shoreline between the existing promenade and the boat launch. The contract provides 180 days to complete the project, which puts substantial completion in early November 2019. After the fishermen have successfully relocated, we can proceed with demolishing the existing structure and reconstructing the sawtooth bulkhead and reprogramming the industrial peninsula. At this point, I'd be happy to address any questions the commissioners may have.
Mr. Shepherd?
Let Ken go first. He's got the most questions.
He doesn't have the most
You
questions.
have the stump.
Well, I go back to my concern. We only got 2 bids on this project, and it came in at an incredibly high cost. And I'm really concerned about doing our projects in this time. And I think I wanted to have some discussion about what other benefits are coming from this other than just the web house, because when I look at the cost per square foot of nearly $250 a square foot for this project, you could actually build a condo for that kind of money. And so it struck me as being an incredibly expensive web house. And my hope is that we can justify that cost by showing the other benefits. And I'm going to ask you to kind of walk through what some of those other benefits are so that we can do this. I in no way, shape, or form want to deny a web house to the fishing community. But I do want you guys to understand that this is an incredibly expensive build in 2019. And again, I'm going to go back to what I believe as a port commissioner is that we're here for economic development. And if we continue to do all of our projects at the highest construction costs that we've seen in years, we're going to dry up our funds and not have anything available for those time periods when we are in a recession or when, and that is coming and it will come, when we need those funds to do construction type projects. And it's just kind of, it's probably something we're going to have to discuss at a later time, but at $250 a square foot, I've got granite counters is my take on it. And I'm wondering what your guys' take is on why the bids came in so high and why we only got 2.
Yeah, and I can't comment to the 2 other than what you just said, which I think it's an incredibly busy economy right now, and the contractors just don't have the room on their schedules. John, if you could go back a slide. Yeah, there you go. So, the 250 a square foot is a component of all that's going on here. And we're moving a trail. We're repaving around 2 other web houses, not just this one. We're fixing a water main, which is associated with all the activity going down here, not just this web house, and the gravel storage yard. So all those components are baked into this bid, if I'm not correct.
That's correct.
So to say 250 a square foot isn't quite fair for what is an uninsulated steel building. That should be a lot less than that. And I think if you subtract each of those components out and left it with just the web house, you're at a much more reasonable number.
Hey, you're still at 150.
You're probably north of that, but yeah, okay.
170, I
yep.
think, is what I calculate.
Yep.
I got 180, but,
Yeah.
So I said it was north of that. Yeah,
You're
so
still
180.
But you're 175.
But you're still
We'll settle at 178 and 50 cents. But it's still an expensive building, but I want to emphasize the driver of this was not to move a web locker for the sake of moving a web locker. The driver of this wasn't even to build a new web locker. The driver was to give the tenants out on the peninsula there in the industrial area the ability to expand. And this Web House 1 is currently out there, if you didn't know that. It's currently sitting out in the middle of the peninsula where we have 4 or 5 real estate tenants, there you go, thank you, that all want to expand and don't have the room to expand because that web house is in the way. If we were to allow some of the tenants to expand the way they do now, we wouldn't have access to the sawtooth. We'd be cutting it off. So the only feasible solution was to create space out on this peninsula by tearing that web house down, rebuilding it where the other web houses were, and it's a real estate play more than it is a storage unit play.
When you look at the building there, it just impedes all the other expansion and work we want to do. And, you know, Ken, to your question about the timing on when we invest, and, you know, one consideration is if we invest now to build, even though we're going to pay a lot, those businesses have the capacity to expand because the economy is good. And if we ask them if they want to expand in a year like 2008, do those 5 businesses want to expand in 2008? Maybe not. But in 2019, we have letters of intent from each of those surrounding businesses that say, yes, please, we're ready to go, we're ready to expand, we're ready to employ more people here. And so that for me is a consideration.
That's an incredibly valid point.
I do share the, you know, consideration on the cost, and I've asked, you know, Director Fix if our team can do this work ourselves. You know, is this something that every time I get another line item to vote on for costs, whether it's architectural or building, I typically think about the same question. When is there a tipping point when it is appropriate for us to invest in staff on-site and in-house that can do this work? I'm not certain that we're at that point, but that is a consideration I want our team to continue to think about. Is we spend a lot of money on these contracts for consulting and support, and they're valuable and it employs people in the community. And I don't know if there's a cost savings to be had from doing that work ourselves. There very well might not be, but it's a consideration that I think is important to have.
One of my questions on that cost component is what are the odds that if you go back out for bid, we get more bidders? Or, I mean, what can we do to try to bring that cost down? I feel like we have a responsibility to do that. And seeing the 2 bids that we got,
we got 2 bids within 1%.
Yeah, and I think the 180 number that was thrown out there is actually a pretty reasonable number for what we're seeing for construction costs. We do have another bid we got back about the same time for another building out there that I think wasn't in line with that. But this one at 180, I'm not sure if you went out 2-3 years ago, you would have gotten a better price than that. Construction costs have gone up in the last 10 years drastically. It is it's not a complicated building by any means, but there's a lot of other work going on. And I'm not sure, and Shirley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that 180 a foot for a steel building like this is that out of line. Yeah, it's not that bad. You start getting...
I'm not going to attack you.
And we're only getting Formica countertops, by the way.
Just on demand, do we have sufficient demand right now in the fishing community to warrant this, and do we anticipate that demand to continue into the future with trends that we expect to see? I know we've just been through a big process in both harbors around web lockers, and we've got strong demand for this type of space. It's a very valuable commodity. And I just want to look, when we're thinking about 10 years into the future, where is our demand going to be here?
Sure. Andy Peterson, Harbor Master at Blaine Harbor. So right now we have 19 people on our waiting list that are looking for a locker, web locker in Blaine, just like this building would provide. So as we go through the process right now, we just went, as you mentioned, went through the big web locker process. By the time we get through our implementation of the new rules, and reallocate web lockers, we're still going to have at least one person on the wait list at this point. So looking forward to the next 10 years. We've got indication from the stakeholder group during the web locker meeting with our stakeholders. We've got indication there are quite a few people that are looking at moving out of the Seattle area. Commercial fishermen that are looking at moving out of the Seattle area. We've also had some indication that there's some boats that are up north that are looking forward to moving down to Puget Sound just because of cost of doing maintenance work on the boat, and the weather conditions up there are sometimes not conducive. So looking for a home base down south. So those would be the markets that we'd be looking at.
That's only because it rains less here, believe it.
Got it. Okay, so in your assessment, we have current demand and we will see future demand as well for this space.
Yes.
And we could not suffice with just expecting web houses 2 and 3 to absorb any.
Yeah, the two web house 2 and 3 that we have now wouldn't be able to absorb the demand at this point, no.
Commissioner Bell?
And you don't see a consolidation in the industry that would create fewer or decrease demand?
Not from my wheelhouse. I'm not in that end of the industry, but at this point I don't know. Not with the wait list demand that we have right now. We've got enough to fill a third web locker.
And then as we go through this process, what are your plans? What are our plans for the other 2 going forward?
As far as
Yeah, I just want to get that on the record.
The other 2 what?
Web lockers? Oh, I guess I'm in the wrong spot.
I think they stay as is.
Yeah, they'd stay as is. We did quite a bit of work the last year on the roof and siding improvements to both of those web
So you
houses.
don't anticipate more capital expense on those?
No, not
as we go
at
forward?
this time on either of those web lockers. Just improvement of the asphalt and the stormwater retention around those 2 buildings. They've got brand-new roofs. They've been re-sided, been repainted. They're good to
And
go.
if we did happen to see a decrease in demand, we could always do something else with those properties versus, and move them into this, and keep everybody in this one.
Yeah, we'd look at the commission for any kind of.
Trying to put a 20,000-foot view on it. I'm also trying to ask the financial questions because that's what we're here for. So I apologize if it's.
No apology necessary, but I think that the 2 existing buildings have had substantial investment over the last couple of years and that they're in pretty decent shape now.
Yeah, well, from this aerial view, that one web locker just doesn't fit there anymore. And I want to give Commissioner Briscoe a lot of credit for seeing a vision for Blaine industrial area, and this is, I think, really the last big piece to make way for that space to be able to be reactivated into the way it used to be, and to attract the jobs that we've had there in the past and the economic vitality of that area. And I think this is a real testament to some of Commissioner Briscoe's work here. So good job, and I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you. Commissioner Bell?
I want to thank you for the insight. I want to thank you for the vision. The sticker shock caught me, as it should have, I think. Set me back on my heels a bit to say, this is a lot of money. But I'm done with questions, so thank you.
So I have a few things to say on this one. It is definitely needed. We're having growing pains for our tenants on the peninsula out there. The building itself is in very disrepair. We'd have to put a lot of money into that particular building to bring it up to snuff. We're settling badly, especially at the north end. You have to drive down into the lockers, so that has to be addressed. I mean, if we kept that building, it would cost us a lot of money. I agree wholeheartedly with you with the problems with the finances and the cost of things. I mean, none of us has that crystal ball to be able to tell if it's going to get better in the future. But I think, as I said earlier, looking back shows us that everything has kept going up. And I think if we were to wait and try and get this cheaper, I truly believe it would cost us more money in the long run, both in tenants' investments, which creates jobs and more money for the economy. This is something that should have been done 30 years ago. But as we say, hindsight's always 20/20, and 30 years ago, people maybe didn't have the vision we're having today. As far as an answer to your question, because I am involved in that industry, I can answer the question. We're not going to lose tenants, and we're not going to go the other way. If anything, we're going to need more. The big cities to the south are pushing their fleets out to build condos, taking storage space like this away on the waterfront to do various other things that they feel is worth more money. I don't see us regressing at all in the industry. I see it probably getting more aggressive. So I share your concerns with what it's costing us to do things now. I'm not so optimistic that things are going to take a crash dive and people are going to do things cheaper than they are today, because I don't see the cost of things to them to do the things they're doing for us going down. Things are going to become more scarce, and it's going to become probably just as costly, if not more costly, to build things. So, with that being said, I think that's all I have to say on the matter, or questions, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything further, Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, it's not so much that I expect maybe even the costs to go down, because they may not. But as we look forward to our future construction on the port, I do want to take into consideration that there will be a downturn at some point, and we need to keep some capital set aside for helping people through a tough time that we know is on the horizon. Economies ebb and flow. And as a commissioner, I've never really had to be responsible for somebody else's money before, but now I am. So it has a whole different impact.
On TV.
Yeah. It has a whole different impact when you're the one sitting up here and you're spending somebody else's money. So it hits hard when you look at spending retail construction costs at a time when you know you might be able to get it wholesale later. But that being said, I agree wholehearted that it needs to move. I see the advantages completely and entirely in getting that out of there and set aside. So you've convinced me.
Commissioner Shepherd, anything further? Diane, if you please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Dawson Construction of Bellingham, Washington for the Blaine Webb House No. 1 construction project in the amount of $3,388,179 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $3,726,997 and reallocate the capital improvement program budgets per the fiscal impact section.
Commissioner Bell.
I don't think I've ever spent close to $4 million before in one fell swoop. Aye.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Aye.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye, passes 3-0. Probably get used to it, Ken.
We've done 40+ million in one full sweep before.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute amendment number 4 to the professional services agreement with RMC Architects for construction phase support for the Blaine Webb House No. 1 project in the amount of $58,045 for a total contract amount of $404,664.
Thank you, Diane. Stating again for the record, John Gibson, project engineer. Commissioners, I did not prepare a presentation for this item since it was originally on the consent agenda. With that said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
It's actually closely related to the action you just took. The action you just took was for the construction of the Webb House. This is for the architecture of the Webb House.
The horse is already out of the barn.
Unless we're going to do this in-house, I imagine we should approve it.
Can you find the wagon? The horse is gone.
Yeah, I have no objections to this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take a vote on it?
Way to put that second.
If you would, please.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute amendment number 4 to the professional services agreement with RMC Architects for construction phase support for the Blaine Webb House No. 1 project in the amount of $58,045 for a total contract amount of $404,664.
Commissioner Shepherd. Aye. Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Briscoe's aye. Carries 3-0.
Commissioners, in the interest of time, we've gone a little late tonight. I believe the agenda the first week of May is much lighter. Would you like to push the financial report off to the first week of May?
Leave it up to the young lady over there.
Baby.
Says yes.
Gentlemen, is that okay with you? Yes. Very good.
Financial report will be on your May agenda.
Okay. Other business? Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah.
Do you want the joke, though?
Oh, yeah. That's why we put it off. You didn't have a joke, right?
Okay. Why don't eggs tell jokes? Because they crack themselves up.
My 6-year-old will like that.
For the guests in the audience, we do this once a quarter.
Commissioner Shepherd. Other business?
Yeah, I do. For Brian, I've got a question on a bike lane. So I was having a conversation with the mayor today about it as well. It's something that is really in the city's hands, but I want to make sure that you're aware of it and can provide any support to the city as they think through this. As we're going up Roeder and we pass Granary Ave, there used to be a bike lane up that bridge, right, on the right-hand side, on the south side. And that was taken out when they added the bike lane on the other side of the road. And it's a difficult location to be a cyclist and try and commute there. It is our bike lane. You know, it's a bike access road. There's a bike lane that precedes the bridge, and it occurs again after the bridge. But while you're pedaling up that elevation, the bike lane is now gone. And what I understand about the plans is where cyclists are being asked to get off the road and onto the sidewalk, which is generally not what we want cyclists to do, and to go along the sidewalk and then back into the road. That's cumbersome, but it's compounded because it's uphill, and at the ramp to get from the road onto the sidewalk, there's a light pole. And so I rode up there with my kids on the back of our e-bike, and I looked at that and I said, no way am I going up onto that sidewalk. That looks dangerous. It creates some turn and navigation around that pole. And I just stayed in the main lane, and I think that's what most cyclists are doing. That is not the way the road is intended in terms of how the city has programmed it, and I would love them to come up with a solution. I don't know exactly what that solution is. I don't know if it's grinding down that sidewalk to the grade of the road so that it creates a smoother transition and makes it easier for a cyclist to utilize that space, or if there's some other option we need. But it's a significant bike corridor that has other, Holly dead ends as and doesn't continue as a street through downtown, and so that is really the bike corridor that goes through there. And in absence of a better option, I'd love to see us address that.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment, and I'm a cyclist as well, and I've noticed that the day they changed that, it was like, whoa, where did the bike lane go? And you're going up that hill, and cars are accelerating up the hill and not seeing you. And I do see that they changed that to a Sharrow lane though, so they do have Sharrows where you're supposed to be in the street and sharing and the cars are supposed to recognize that. But I'll take this up with the waterfront team and see if there's something we can do and just make that aware. I don't know any solution off the top of my head, but I do know exactly what you're talking about. So I'll see what the city's waterfront team.
So this is right after you pass Granary Ave, going up Roeder, where it turns into Chestnut.
Oh, okay.
So right on the bridge, it used to have a bike lane on the right-hand side, but to put in the turn lane and then other reconfigurations for the entrance to the Granary Avenue, that bike lane went away for a little while. And then when you get to the top of the hill, it comes back. But it's
The guy with the paint eraser, when he was erased it, painted something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think it's created an unsafe situation. There's a lot of people moving in and out of there, and it's gonna create a hazard.
Sure. Yep, I will take that up with their team and see what I can report back.
I had a question for Kyle. I've been hearing some reports of increased incidents of small theft at Squalicum Harbor. And I was wanting to just get an update from you on what you're hearing and if there's anything we can do to help. And also, we had a conversation earlier today about a gate at, putting a gate on Gate 5, I believe it is, and to brief us a little bit on that.
Sure. For the record, my name's Kyle Randolph. I'm the harbor master for Squalicum Harbor. Certainly anybody that's ever worked at a marina is no stranger to burglaries. Anytime you amass that much property value in one area, you're going to attract predators. And so my staff and I work hard to try to minimize that. To answer a question that was asked earlier today, what does the coyote say to the cat in front of the food bowl? And he doesn't say anything. He just takes whatever he wants. And my staff and I do the best we can.
Oh, and I like that.
What we do our best to try to shoo the coyote away without losing our tail. And it's an uphill battle. And a lot of that is just, I personally feel, in relation to the fact that Bellingham's a growing community, and there are some negative aspects to growing, and there's always a small percentage of the population that's going to choose to take rather than try to make for their own. And we plan for that. We know that's coming. We, a couple years ago, spent quite a bit of money on a camera system to try to protect the assets we have at the harbor. This year, we do have a gatehouse for Gate 5. That was championed by Lauren Kapp on the Marina Advisory Committee. That's going to go in this year at the bottom of the Gate 5 ramp. It's the best place to put it. I'm hopeful that's going to have an impact over there. That's a tough area to put a gate. There's a reason why there's no gate there now. When the fishermen are gearing up, that place goes from only a few people down there to a whole bunch of crew, and trying to manage a gate and codes and everything else that goes along with it just really seemed like a daunting task. But that is going in this year. More importantly, we've already approved a big electronic access system that's going in this year. And I really believe that's going to have a dramatic impact on our ability to protect the assets at the Port of Bellingham. Someone can always get in by dinghy and really cause havoc at a marina, but a vast majority of the problems that happen on a dock come by land, and being able to throw away the concept of gate codes, which are being given out handily by, seems like anyone who wants one, we think the FOBs are going to have a big impact on what's going down at the harbor. Recently, something's happened, though, and we're still trying to work that out. There have probably been 15 burglaries in the last 2 weeks that we have been made aware of. And when it first happened, 1 or 2, we kind of get used to that. This is a seasonal thing. As people start coming back to their boats after having been gone for months, not paying attention to their vessels, they start noticing that someone's been in there. And that's a challenge for us historically, because were they there a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 6 months ago? We don't have any idea, and quite frankly, there's not a lot that we can do about it. But something's happening right now. And so when my staff and I recognized that there was a problem, we immediately took some steps to try to counteract that. One was we brought it to the Marine Advisory Committee to try to get them to spread the word and ask their help on what's going on around here. Also, last week, I brought in all of our guard staff and gave them a training, updated them on what's happening, talked to them about how their patrol route should go, the things they should be paying attention to, what they should be doing if they confront somebody. And I think that was helpful, because there are eyes and ears after hours. I also reached out to the Bellingham Police Department to let them know, if they didn't know already, certainly there's a lot of police reports being filed, but to offer our help if they want our cameras to be placed in a specific way. They're doing the best they can, but the theft that's been happening recently is extremely, for the most part, not everyone, but for the most part, extremely low-value stuff. And I think that whoever's perpetrating this, I really think it's 1 or 2 people that understand the harbor really well. They know how to blend in and pass off for customers. They know what to say. They know to not steal anything with a serial number or of high value that really attracts the interest of the police department. And We, quite frankly, haven't been able to figure out who it is or what we're going to need to do to stop it. And so the thing that I did on Friday, which I hope will be the most helpful thing, was for the first time ever, I sent out an email to every Squalicum Harbor customer, letting them know of the problem, letting them know what the port has done, letting them know what the police department is doing, and asking for their help to be our eyes and ears. We've got 1,400 customers at Squalicum Harbor, and if people start paying attention, we will catch whoever is doing this. We get a lot of really weird reports, like this is a true story. Someone has said, I noticed someone went on Jack's boat 2 weeks ago and he used bolt cutters to remove the lock, and I didn't think anything of it. And then I realized later that that wasn't Jack, and that shouldn't happen. So I'm telling you now, and 2 weeks later does us no good. So the idea with the email was to let people to know they need to call us right away. If we know right away, we can come down right away. Our guards can come down right away. We can call 911 right away. But realistically, we have a very short window for when we can be effective. And if someone tells us even a day later, it becomes really difficult to stop the problem. So I'm hopeful that that communication is going to be helpful in the future. But right now, I have no idea who's doing this.
So when people do see something that's going on, who should they call first?
If it's during office hours, they should definitely call the harbor office. We're here from 8 to 5, 7 days a week. My staff know the majority of the customers by face, and they have the ability to go down there, confront the person, verify that they belong or don't belong. And it's more than just making sure they're a customer. They could be a vendor, they could be a niece, they could be anyone. That's what makes it so challenging. Sure. After hours, our security guards are here. There's always someone working for the Port of Bellingham at Squalicum Harbor. So after hours, they can call our guards. Our guards can get backup from their supervisors. They can call me, and I will come in anytime during the night. And then obviously if they're actively seeing something that is really bad, they should call 911.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And if there's anything else we can do to support you, please feel free to update us or let us know.
Perfect,
But
thank you.
I do think those key fobs are gonna make a big deal, and I think the gate 5 is gonna help as well, even if it's closed predominantly after hours.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fobs are going to be huge for us because we'll be able to know when people are coming and going, or not going, but coming at least. And if we get a report, something bad happened and it was fine at 11 o'clock at night, but it was terrible at 12, we can figure out who opened that door at 11:55 and know exactly what's going on.
Okay.
I got a couple questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Kyle, on the gate at the bottom of gate 5, why are we putting the gate at the bottom?
We looked at the top. It's just too easy to climb around because the landing for Gate 5 ramp is set back a ways, and then in front of that are those huge boulders. And so if we were to put a gatehouse, it needs to be on something that's not going to hinge. So you can't put it on the ramp itself because that's articulating. So you either put it up on land and it gets set way too far back, and then someone can just climb those boulders and then climb up the ramp and then get down. Whereas if you put it at the base of the ramp and you give a good width around it, they really just walk into a perimeter wall. And then they have the option of either swimming back to shore or going up the ramp or trying to climb a 6-foot gatehouse or an 8-foot
Okay,
gatehouse.
but the thing that concerns me with putting it at the bottom of the ramp is your, number one, your tidal drop, and your gate's gonna be right at the bottom of your ramp, and you're coming down there with a heavy load in a wagon. How are you gonna deal with opening that gate when you're by yourself, when it's at?
So it wouldn't be right up against the base of the ramp. It would be closer to like Gate 7, Gate 6, Gate 9. Those are all located at the bottom of the ramp. And it's set back plenty ways so that you can come back with a dock cart, land, and still have room to be able to swing that gate either in or out, depending on how they design it. That would probably be an outswing, though, just because of that issue.
Right, just curious, because it's kind of a tough deal when you get to the bottom of a ramp and you're by yourself and it's steep, so.
Yeah.
Commissioners, they're starting to pave, so I'm going to ask my staff to leave if they want to go home. You may be here for a long time. I'm watching tons of trucks go in. I think we're going to pave Rotor tonight, so it's going to close here, probably not till like midnight, but it's going to close, and they're going to be traffic controlled between now and then. So if you want to go, feel free to get up, leave.
Commissioner Bell?
Nobody leaves.
Oh, are you?
I'm done. Thank you, Kyle.
Okay.
Anybody else, any other comments for Kyle?
No.
I just have one other. I'd love to get an update on the granary building from Harcourt and particularly from their leasing division, who's managing that. Where are we with those? I know we're close on occupancy. I know the roads are pretty much done. We've only got one lease announced, and I'd love to get an update on where they are and where we can expect for public use of that facility.
We'll have that for you in May, certainly.
If we get that on the second meeting in May, maybe.
Okay.
Or first, either one.
Yeah, I'd push for it for the first, because I think things are happening. I believe they were going to get a TCO, a temporary certificate of occupancy, either this week or next. That was my last conversation with them. The yoga studio should be opening at that time, and they have other tenants in the queue. They just haven't signed leases with them. But I think it's a great thing to bring Chris Erdman in here to give us an update, if someone from Harcourt isn't here besides Chris.
Great, thank you. That's it for me.
Kind of wonder when it's not our business anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, we've sold it to them, they develop it, they're starting to rent it to people. When do we not keep tabs on them?
It's a great question. I think it's going to be us putting pressure on them until at least the third or fourth project, because we want to keep these projects
Well,
going.
no, I
right?
mean, no, I'm talking about the granary building
Yeah.
in specific.
But they all tie together, right? They all tie together, and they have to perform on that one before we're going to give them the third project. You know, recall we sold them the land for the second project, so, you know, we're in bed there, whether we like it or not. But the third project is something that I believe in the fourth one is some things we have leverage on, and Commissioner Shepherd, I think, is right to ask for an update on there.
I'm not saying, I'm just wondering when we,
There's definitely a point in time when we start drawing back.
that when we don't ask about the particular building.
I think after the fourth project, the thing has enough momentum that we'll be able to pull back and feel good about it. We're not quite there yet.
I wasn't meaning to fall back on the other stuff. I
Yeah.
went on
Yep.
as we go. Anything else, Commissioner?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, if I had a brand-new truck, I'd be worried about getting tar on my brand-new truck.
Can I get a ride
I'm not
home?
gonna start paving until after midnight, right?
I've got my son-in-law's car, my future son-in-law's car, so it doesn't matter to me.
Wow. That was brutal.
I hope he's listening.
Probably the single YouTube viewer right
So
now.
I'm gonna probably defer this discussion for a later time, but I really do want to discuss the impact of the MOTCA funds and the legislation coming through with you as a commission, because I'm seeing the impacts being unduly burdening the industries out there at Cherry Point. I mean, I think right now when we look at the way they're looking to fund the MOTCA funds, I want to discuss all of the impacts that are coming down the pike, the addition of the conditional use permits, the wage increases that are going to be mandated, the tug requirements that are going to go on. I mean, the list is endless of ways to drive up the price of energy. And I think it's going to really be a detriment to that industry, and it is one of our keystones, and I want to make sure that we at least discuss, and I think first and foremost, I want to discuss the use of those MOTCA funds and making sure that we put our voice in to make sure that they don't get stolen to go back to fund administration at the health department, but they actually go towards the cleanup operations as they go. Now, the current legislation does say that. I just want to make sure that we go through that process. And I don't want to keep you here tonight on that. I just want to make sure it's on our plate for, future discussion, because I think it deserves a deeper dive than what we've given it. And I really do want to weigh in on that, because that is a big employer, and they are going to have an impact on the marketability of that product locally. And I don't want to lose competitiveness with the California refineries and those kind of operations, because we've just laid too many taxes on, and those taxes get flowed down to us at the end of the day. So.
In between, we'll get Brian and Mike to be prepared to give a MOTCA update at the next one. There's been a lot of movement in the last week on MOTCA. The legislation clearly has some language in there that restricts the ability to, grab those funds for other uses. And the amount that they're doing per barrel went from $2.52 to about $1.30 something. And I think it's going to continue to move downward. I can't remember what our math was, what today's level is, but it's below that $1.30 level. But to go from $2.52 to $1.30 was a big move, and I think that's going to continue to drop. So I think doing this at the first meeting in May might be a good opportunity, because we'll have much better information as to where that's moved.
Yeah, and I think you've heard this now 4 times, so you're going to hear it again. But I just, philosophically, it's not just petroleum that we're cleaning up. I mean, we cleaned up a paper mill's site, and we're not taxing toilet paper or paper towels, right? So it's unduly burdening one industry, is my take.
I have two quick things. And I'd like to get Mr. Birdsall could give me, or give all of us on the first May meeting, where we're at with the request by Whatcom Fishermen's Association on the mortgage agreement. If we're going to have a meeting on that, get together, we need, they're requesting, they have requested and are still requesting that, and wondering when we're going to get together and discuss their concerns with some of the language in the mortgage agreement.
Is this for the mortgage agreement or for the web lockers?
Huh?
Is this for the mortgage agreement or for
Excuse
the
me,
web
for
lockers?
the web lockers,
Okay.
I'm sorry. And I don't need any answers tonight, Alan, just to.
Okay, so you, just to be sure that I was clear, Alan Birdsall, the manager of Marinas, you wanted an update on the next meeting, is what you were asking?
Yeah, when we're gonna have a gathering or a meeting with those folks and try and iron out whatever it is, if we can or can't, and so that it's addressed.
Okay, yeah, we'll get that moving and meet with them.
All right, thank you. The other thing is, the Working Waterfront Coalition has put something forward before, and Jim, if next meeting, if you could give us a bit of a presentation on what you spoke to me about the other day when I met with you folks on the land use.
Cornwall Cove?
Huh?
Are you referring to Cornwall Cove?
No, to the biodiversity, yeah, if you could come and maybe speak to that, so that all three commissioners and staff could hear, and maybe then we could make a motion or move forward to have meetings to do something about what you wish, folks wish to see.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Other than that, that's all I have. Anybody have anything else? But that's all, folks.